All right, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Town of Copper Canyon Planning and Zoning Commission meeting into order. 7 o'clock. The order here is a little, thank you, one more comment. We've got a lot of public comments, but before we do that, I think we need to go through some of the other agenda items. First, let me state what we, well, first, are there any comments on anything that's not on the agenda? Is there any citizen that wants to make a comment on any subject that is not on the agenda? Okay.
This transit, very straightforward. Well, okay, the number you know, I've been down with COVID ever since August, and it's been a long recovery, but I have to say, I've never received so many kind comments and prayers from the residents of Copper Canyon, and it really lifts your spirit. You're lying in a cloistered room, wondering where your next breath is coming from. And that type of encouragement really helps. And I want to thank everybody who's doing this.
Thank you. I think I, as a citizen, would like to make a second comment request. Hopefully I can use this microphone here. I would like to ask Donna if she could talk to us a little bit about Cross Timbers water. There's been a little bit of noise on the internet about the certificate that Cross Timbers water has requested. And I want the citizens of this town to know that your town staff has been working very hard to stop Cross Timbers water. So I don't know if you can talk to that for just a second.
In order for Cross Timbers water, they would like to get into a wastewater business. In order for them to do that, they have to have a customer. There are 4 towns, which is Jubilo, Bartonville, part of Highland Village on the east side of 2499, Copper Canyon. In order to get a CCN, they have to have one customer. So if Copper Canyon decided that we wanted them to handle our wastewater, that would be opening it up to the other cities. The other cities don't want that. So Copper Canyon has not signed anything. We have no intent at this point, the council, to do anything like that. But that's the only way they can start providing wastewater. But if one town signs with them, that opens it up to their whole territory, all 4 towns.
So we all stand together, we all end up with sewage together. And I think everyone here is aware that if they have access to sewage service to this town, all of a sudden, we're gonna start seeing more developers interested in our town. So I do want you to know that this is not something taken lightly, and that the town has fought back and has joined hands with Martinville, Nutley, and whoever else to kind of say, no, we don't want you to handle sewage for the town. Okay, thank you. You have a comment?
Yes. It's a question.
Okay, question.
Outside of
Okay.
First of all, thank y'all for your volunteering to do this. I know it's a kind of intimidating meeting. Is there a zoning ordinance about tree removal? I got mixed stories. Mr. Johnson told me there is, and this gentleman here told me there's not. And Ron told me that they're not gonna touch those pine trees. Is there a tree ordinance of non-removal?
No, but there are ordinances regarding trees on property.
But there is.
There's not an ordinance against, no, you can't remove trees. I don't
So
believe
there
there
is
is.
you can't take down trees, sir.
Yeah, of certain
You
types.
cannot go and just clear that. No,
Right.
it's not.
Yeah, it's a yes or no answer. It's not just an absolute prohibition, but it's not a absolute, you can do anything you want either.
So that's kind of weird if you cover your face. So the question I asked later, then, based on Mr. Johnson, the mayor saying that the pine trees will not be touched with any stuff.
I think you will find that they will be. It's very difficult, and just be honest.
No, I respect it. I hear so many different stories.
You gotta grade the land, right, so for sewage and things like that, so it's impossible to tell a developer, no, you can't cut down any trees. But you can, in some circumstances, depending on your development agreement,
I respect that, I understand that. I was just telling, my name's Jeff, I'm talking, tell you, the mayor, he told me those will not be touched. So some needs to correct him,
okay,
so it's Jeff Ford.
thank you. Okay, so, before we go into our consent items, I wanted to take a little quick survey, kind of get off script here just a little bit. First, how many people in this room own land in Copper Canyon? Show of hands. Anybody? Oh, okay, there are a few people who know those. Okay, so who here tonight is here tonight to speak for turning Copper Canyon into a high-density residential neighborhood like Highland Village or Lantana? Nobody? Oh, come on, don't be shy. Okay, so Donnie, turn off the tar and put the feathers back in place. All right. So I think is it fair to assume that most of you, if not all of you, are here because you want to keep Copper Canyon rural, keep it green, keep it equestrian nation. So I would ask you, I know many of you have your comments. Please don't stand up tonight and tell us you want to keep Copper Canyon green, equestrian, rural, because everybody in this room wants that. Everybody, we know that. This panel up here tonight, how many of us are developers? Anybody here a developer? Is there anyone in this room who's a developer other than Dave? No, there's one guy in the back. Okay. So none of us are developers. So please keep that in mind in your comments because you've got a good mix here. You've got people who own large acreage, you got people who own medium acreage, and you got people who own small acreage. That's why this committee is kind of diverse. And so all of us are on the same side here. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Okay, so how many people here that are property owners plan to turn their property into a nature conservation trust? Nobody. Okay, how many people here plan to contribute their property to the town of Copper Canyon with the legal stipulation that it be turned into a park, an equestrian trail, bird sanctuary, or otherwise green acreage? Please hold your hands high. We want to get your name and address correct. Gee, nobody. Okay, so I guess the rest of you plan to or expect to sell your property someday. Maybe your kids will sell it, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, but all of you expect to sell your property someday since you're not going to give it to the town. So on that, how many of you want your neighbors to tell you who you can and cannot sell your property to? Is there anybody here that really?
According to zoning, yes.
According to zoning, yeah. Right. Okay, so again, I understand that this is a passionate issue. I think we all understand that. We all understand people are very concerned about the future development of the town. And I know a lot of people would love to get on the record and say the same thing. But in fairness to our other citizens, please try and keep your comments unique or separate or specialized to your own case. If we can ask that. Again, everybody is welcome to speak, and we will listen all night long if we have to, but please try and be kind to your fellow citizens here and be as efficient as possible so as many people can speak as possible. That's okay? All right. So what we are here today, first thing I'd like to do is go through our consent items so we can get that off the agenda. Approve the August 30 minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Has everybody read them?
Yes.
Motion? Motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. Unanimously approved. Okay, so the purpose of our meeting tonight is a public hearing to conduct regarding a request to amend the master plan ordinance, comprehensive zoning ordinance and zoning map of the town of Copper Canyon, Texas, by amending the master plan, the map thereof, and amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance and zoning map to grant a change in zoning from residential 2, R2, to Plan Development Town Center 1, that's PD TC-1, on approximately 10 acres, and by granting a change in zoning from the Town Center to Plan Development Town Center 1, PD TC-1, on approximately 10 acres of real property to allow for the development of approximately 35 single-family lots located north of FM 407, between Journey Road and Copper Canyon Road, Benton Central Appraisal District properties 17043, 17044, 17045, and 17047, Copper Canyon, Denton County, Texas, providing the concept plan, development standards, and regulations, street detail, entrance details, preliminary storm sewer plan, preliminary water plan, preliminary sewer plan, detailed fence, and street lighting. Okay, so let me make a quick introduction before I ask our town attorney to step in. This particular item is quite confusing, and it's just confusing. And I'm sorry it is that way, but you know that's the way legal things are sometimes. In 2005, there's a portion of the Williams property was zoned as town center. It was the intent of the Williams family at that time to have all of their property included in the town center. Williams is here tonight and she can testify to that. That was their intent, to have all of their property, not just a piece of it, zoned as town center. However, the meets and bounds description for the property left out approximately 10.5 acres, which we're going to call the northern portion. So Ms. Williams is here tonight asking the council, this commission, to rezone this northern portion from R2 to what is called Planned Development Town Center, PDTC1. We're just going to call it PDTC1. The project being presented for this property is called the Williams Ranch. The request is for 35 single-family lots and will be a private gated community. The developer has presented all the documents required. This is not the first time we've discussed this. I think as most of you know, many of you who have been here and testified or made public comments in the past. So what we're doing is there's really two pieces to this. I'll say it my way and then the lawyers can say it differently. There was a mistake made by the surveyor during the meets and bounds. The intent was, and everyone believed that, all of the Williams property was included in town center. For those of you with maps, which hopefully everybody in the room has a map, on the map, it's kind of a rectangle, a long rectangle, and then there's a little small rectangle on top. What we're talking about here is the small rectangle on top. In the meets and bounds, they just did the long rectangle, including a portion of the Williams property, but they left off this little rectangle on top. It was the intent of the town, it was the intent of the Williams family, it was the intent of everyone to include that in town center. And frankly, up until recently, everybody believed it was in town center. Every town center map that we've seen since day one had that little yellow block up there as part of the town center map. So recently, and it's not clear to me who discovered this, Donna or Julie, could you tell me, how did this come to our attention?
Chris, the engineer.
Okay, so it's Chris's fault.
He discovered it.
He discovered it, not his fault originally, but the reason we're here is because Chris kindly has found an error in our past paperwork. So there's two pieces to our project tonight. One is to take that little strip and put it in town center, in essence, where everyone has thought it has been all along. And then to take that piece and add it to the vertical piece that's already in the town center. Call it one property, and then I'll describe that as PD Town Center 1. So this is not a process of taking property that nobody ever thought was going to be anything other than R2. We have all been thinking for years that it was part of town center and therefore zoned town center, not zoned R2. Technically, it is zoned R2, but the landowner has made a request that we put it in town center. That's what we're here to discuss tonight. So this is not a new plan at all. This is administratively correcting some errors that have been made in the past. And so I would now like to ask our town attorney, Bob, if, first of all, did I describe that properly, or have you got a better way to say it?
That's fine. As I go through this, I think it'll come to light what we have and what we don't have.
Oh, can you talk closer?
As we discuss this, I'll clear up the misconceptions that Mark made in the mistake. But in essence, he's correct. And let me preface this, but since the day I became town attorney, I've been dealing with this piece of property in summer of 2019, and here we are 2 years later, still discussing. One of the things I think is important for you to understand what is zoning and why is it legal, and why does the government have a right to tell someone how they can develop their land. When you went to civics class in 8th grade, you were probably told that, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the Constitution protected your property from government invasion. However, over the course of time, the Supreme Court has recognized the ability of municipalities that have general police powers in the United States to zone and make reasonable regulations regarding the development of your land. Because the development of your land has a corresponding effect on your neighbors, and the government would have the ability to protect and strike a reasonable balance between private property rights and government regulations. This is recognized in the Supreme Court in the United States in the early part of the 20th century in a case called Euclid, and it involved around the city of Euclid outside of Cleveland. And that, if you've been to the East Coast and gone to Brooklyn or gone to New York, Baltimore, you've noticed that there are houses next door to factories. There's tenement housing next to single-family residences to businesses, and that's because they didn't have any zoning. So it was the opinion of the court that the government acting reasonably should adopt rules and regulations and develop zoning, which was how a landowner could develop his land in relationship to a ordinance or a statute that was enacted by the legislature. And we have that in Texas. Dallas was one of the very first cities that would adopt the zoning ordinance in the state of Texas. And of course, all of our smaller municipalities that reside around Dallas followed suit. We don't think of ourselves as being next to Dallas, but in fact, we're influenced because of the professionals, and UNT has a very fine MPA program which produces people such as our city administrator and city managers, people that are involved in zoning decisions and planners, both UTA and UNT, which are in our region. So we are familiar with this concept of zoning. So, as a general law city, the Texas legislature gave that ability to all municipalities, just not home rule municipalities, enacting the zoning enabling act. And it says in the zoning enabling act, the governing body of the city may regulate the height, number of stories, and size of building and other structures. They may adopt regulations regarding the percentage of the lot that may be occupied. They say that we can regulate the size of the yards, the courts, and open spaces within those districts. We can pass regulations regarding population density, how many people can live in a certain specified area. We can regulate the location and use of buildings, other structures, land for business, industrial, residential, or other purposes. One for pumping and extraction and use of groundwater, which I don't know. So we have done that in this town. And so the governing body has passed an ordinance called the zoning ordinance, comprehensive zoning ordinance, that has lots of components. So that is the legislative scheme which we have. And also, as part of that, zoning enabling act says that we have the ability to adopt a zoning regulation or a zoning district boundary, including an amendment to it, a repeal of it, or other changes of a regulation or boundary. And one of the things I want you to focus on is the difference between a regulation and a boundary, because it's important to understand this situation which we find ourselves. So, that was the background. In 2004, the city enacted two districts, two town center districts, one north of 407, one south of 407. And the one north of 407, they went on in 2005 that we would now go from R2 to town center north. No residential, single-family detached homes were allowed in that district. That district encompasses the property which we were here tonight. So originally, the vision was in the town in the zoning regulation and the boundary for town center included no residential homes. In 2014, the town center district was amended to allow single-family residential detached as a text change amendment in town center. And the density was 3 units per acre on the north portion of town center district. Single family first allowed based on a concept. So the property that we're here tonight, now Kate made reference to this map. Get that out there. We have seen this map at night. It's been changed over the years. Originally, it did not include the hammerhead or the L or the north part of the property. This map says specifically in the bottom left-hand corner, a comprehensive plan or concept plan shall not constitute zoning regulations or established zoning district boundaries. So this map does not establish any boundaries for any use within town center development. As a matter of fact, it includes property that's not even zoned. And this map does not change that zone. So when Mr. Pate tells you tonight that Ms. Williams is asking that a portion of her property be rezoned from R2 to PDTC number 1, that is correct. Because we cannot find any ordinance which has a meets and bounds description which changes that zoning, because this map does not change zoning. And remember, originally, as I'm about to tell you, there was some subsequent amendments. So there's two components to the zoning ordinance. An ordinance under state law has to be in writing. And it has to have the words "be it ordained," and then from thereafter, the regulations and the boundaries of the zoning district are established. So there's two components. What are those regulations going to be? What uses? What are the height? All those things that I read to you in the beginning. Those are the regulations. But one of the requirements is we have to have a boundary for a district. You can't have a district without a boundary. So how does that boundary, and it has to be part of the zoning ordinance. It has to be in writing. To be established by the adoption of a property description of streets. Because how do you know where the boundaries are if you don't have a map? How do you know where the boundaries are if you don't have meets and bounds description? How do you know where the boundaries are if the map's not attached to the zoning ordinance? You don't. So what we have then in 2016, and again in 2019, there are text change amendments on the regulations for town center, what is it? The north portion that we're here about. And they then begin to describe 3 dwelling units per acre, and then subsequent ordinance was adopted in 19-004 and 3/11/2019 and 19-005 to change the regulations for town center and introduce a state transition. This is not a zoning exhibit. It's not a boundary. There's nothing on this map that indicates that this is a zoning. If you were to pull 19-004 and 19-005, you will find absolutely no property description connected with that ordinance. No boundaries. What are the boundaries of this estate transition? I know when you read the ordinance, it would appear as if the state's transition as appears on the master plan. But I defy anybody to put those boundaries on the ground because there was no map. I don't care what you were told. I don't care what was promised to you. Not because I wish anything bad upon you, but I am obligated to only follow the ordinances that are adopted. The minutes are replete with references to these changes in the regulations, that there was no zoning being accomplished as a result of the passage of those ordinances. I wasn't here. I didn't hear what was said, but I've read the minutes and I've read the ordinances. And so what you have is a town town center that comprises, and let me reference something else. And I only can find the record. So if I go to the zoning, which was at your table or at your chairs, this was adopted in December of 2019. This is your zoning. You can see the blue square. It's all blue. Don't have any yellow, don't have any red. There's no boundaries on this map. So all the uses that are allowed in the regulations, if I were to go to court and defend that this yellow area was a boundary, the judge would go, Mr. Hager, how come it's not attached to the zoning ordinance? I don't know. I don't know is not a good answer when you go to court. If the intent was to zone the property in 2019, this map would have been changed. Those ordinances were passed on 3/11/2019, 3/11, both of them on the same night. This map was never changed. Those ordinance, if you'll see an ordinance, not that I'm, Benjamin Cardoza or a great lawyer, but one of the things I put in the zoning ordinance, it says to amend the zoning ordinance and the map thereof. And there is attached Exhibit A, which is an exhibit which has a property description or a map, so that Chris and his company will change this map, because this is your zoning map. This establishes the boundaries for the uses within those districts. Not this map. This is just a comp plan. This is just, hey, this is what we think we might do. This is what you have. This map does not have estates transition anywhere. That estate transition could go anywhere within that blue box. It does not include the north track of the Williams property. It's yellow. Yellow under this map is R2. Now, there's also, if in fact I am wrong, in 2019 did change the map, the map's never been changed. Some lawyer may argue that there is a requirement in the law that all municipal acts are presumed and conclusively presumed to be valid as of the date they occur. So, and it says on the third anniversary date of the effective date of the act or proceeding has expired. Well, the third anniversary date in 2019 is 2022. So the statute of limitations is not run on whatever happened in 2019. This section does not apply to this conclusive presumption. What a conclusive presumption means is it cannot be contested in court. It says an act or proceeding that was void at the time it occurred. Well, these acts, in my opinion, are void at the time they occurred because there was no map attached to the ordinance, no property description, which delineated what the district was to have this estates transition zone. But assuming I'm wrong, now you come down to the third argument is who owns the land and what are their rights, because they have rights to all of our neighbors. So the property owner who owns the property, the person that they have sold the property to or conditionally selling the property to also have rights. And what are their rights? Well, their rights are to file an application and ask the P&Z, ask the city council to change the zoning to a use that they feel is appropriate, is economically viable, and meets the requirements of the city's other ordinance. So even if I'm wrong, which I don't think I am, the property owner has the right to change the zoning to whatever they think. And the council and the P&Z have the right to accept those applications and to give the public notice and have a required hearing. I would agree with that. Also, the planned development district of town center also requires that anybody that wants to develop in town center has to file a site plan, which is very similar to what Mr. Siciliano has presented in terms of what he thinks, how it's to be divided up, his concept plan, et cetera, for the number of lots that he desires to develop on this property. And we are required to give you all notice, give you an opportunity to be heard, and give you the opportunity to argue either for or against his development. That's required under our current plan development. So far, no one's done anything other than, at this point, attempted to comply with our city regulations. Mr. Siciliano, and Ms. Williams, as the current owner, have the right to come here and ask us to change the zoning. They have the right to come in here and ask us to review the plan. Like I say, I wasn't here in March of 2019, and I don't know what you were told. I don't know what you were told at the coffee shop. I don't know what you were told out in the parking lot. I don't know what you were told in Donaldson or Sheila's. But I can read the minutes, and I can look at the documents, and that's what they tell us. So, here we are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so a couple of comments. Many of you were here when this master plan was put in place. And I think many of you may recall my having said multiple times that this particular map. Does anybody remember how I described this map?
Pretty picture.
Pretty picture, thank you, pretty picture. And again, we specifically put the language on the bottom that said this is not zoning. So I think that was clear that the intent of the council, you can see that this was not a zoning. Okay, so that's what.
And Mr. Chairman, the law specifically says in chapter 2013 that master plan ordinance and its map is not zoning.
Okay.
Because all of the notices and all the things that we have to do in order to change zoning are not required. It's to protect the public.
So let me ask you, Bob, this group here, what if we decide we just don't like your advice? We disagree with you completely and we're going to do something different. What might happen? What might be some consequences of that?
Well, we do have discretion, so let me say that. So if you were to act as if the pretty picture, as you have described it, is zoning and denied it based on that, you may have liability because I told you otherwise. There is a case that says that once you've been advised by the town or city attorney of their legal opinion, you act in derogation, you lose your immunity.
Well, thank you. That's heartwarming. And anyone want to resign? Just yet? No? Okay. All right.
Thankfully for you, you have less exposure.
Right, so you can say things we can't. Okay. Could I ask perhaps, Larry Johnson, would you mind making a few comments to help us with the historical perspective on what the Williams family asked at the time? Because I think that's important to how the town center, how this mistake ended up being a challenge.
Larry, can you include the years you were mayor?
I was mayor in 2004, 2005. So that's when the,
Original.
yes, that's correct. Nancy, Henry, I think you remember being shoulder to shoulder on the whole process. But essentially, in 2003, 2004, one of the challenges that was facing this town was we had a long list of roads that needed to be repaired. And flat out, this town didn't have the financial ability at that time to pay for that. That coincided at the same time were two significant property owners. The Vicaries on south side of 407 and significantly on the north side, together with Joe and Luann Williams, had approached council town about, we want the ability to monetize our investment in our properties. We lived in a commercial zone. 407 at that time was busy, and it's, as we all know, it's very busy now. And looking at what was the best way, medium and long term, to address the financial challenges facing the town, and also looking ahead as to how we need to respond to the reasonable request of landowners to monetize their long-term investment in property. And as the town worked through at that time, the updated master plan, tremendous public input as to what we should do. And essentially, the 1 acre, the 2 acre, the 5 acre zoning was maintained, except for in the corridor of 407 between Jernigan and before Copper Canyon Road. The concept at that time was town center south, town center north. Subsequently, from about 2015 to 2019, there were requests from the Vicaries because they had not been successful in putting together what they felt was a viable town center commercial project. They requested that there be the town center pieces be rezoned residential. I personally, and I went at least twice to the meetings at the church on 407 and voiced my opposition to 1/3 acre lots. I did not think that that was appropriate. And to this day, I have feuded with the Vicaries over what was done on previously Town Center South, which is now the Toll Brothers Vickery development. I thought that those parcels at a minimum should have been 1/2 acre. I was not in office at that time. I did not have the ability to vote, but I would not have supported that. The folks, as Mr. Hager is going through the recitation, and yep, I'm sitting up here in council now. I don't like approving 1/3 acre lots. Flip it around. We don't like 1/3 acre lots. That could be zoned still commercial. And in retrospect, probably that should not have been the direction to go. But at that time, I can assure you, there was no opposition in this town in 2004, 2005 to that plan. Now, I think when we got to 2015 to 2019, I think, that there was opposition. I didn't support 1/3 acre, but, it's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback on this stuff. Keep in mind, we have a challenge in this town. We have a low tax base. We have been very, very fortunate. Denton County gave funding for Copper Canyon, gave funding for Chin Chapel, and gave funding for Orchid Hill. Nobody should bet the future of this town that that event, that gratuitous funding by Denton County is ever going to happen again. And anybody that's sitting up here, whether it's on P&Z, the council, or in the mayor's office, you have to deal with hard facts. You have to look to the future as to how we're going to pay for roads, how we're going to pay for public safety, and how we're going to pay to run this town. And again, go back to the fundamentals. Nobody likes less than 1 acre lots. The reality, when you go look at that zoning map today, there is one corridor that's got that. And by the way, we all drive on 407. It's 4 lanes today. Anybody want to take bets on when it gets to 6 lanes? Because in our lifetime, that's going to happen. And let's be realistic how we're going to deal with this. The houses that are going on these lots, probably most of us would not purchase them. We're fortunate, we live on a 20-acre farm. Many people here live on more than 1 acre. These are houses, folks, that are going to cost easily $800,000 to $1 million plus. We're not talking about denigrating the housing stock in this town. Is it a perfect answer? Heck no. How did we get here? I think there's been a good explanation.
Larry, could you talk about the Williams request they've requested all of their property be rezoned town center, isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I had the pleasure of knowing Joe, and he very much cared about his wife. And he said, I want to make sure that I can do this so that she is taken care of. I am sorry that Joe is not here tonight to come forward, but the 2 prime movers in that corridor, the 2 town centers, the Vickeries and the Williams. And Joe was a straightforward guy, but you know what? I love my land. We've enjoyed it. This is not country anymore. Go walk out and listen to the traffic. And when you read the ordinance clearly picks up the Williams Ranch. And unfortunately, nobody here is a surveyor. And I don't know. He's an engineer.
All right, thank you, Larry. Very much appreciated. Well, was it a specific question for Larry? Or?
Yes, Larry.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure that Mr. King
Could you take the microphone, please, so we can get the.
Well, no, I just asking the question. I think I heard you saying you're not in favor then or now of 1/3, but the reality is maybe we need the 1/3. Is that what you said?
Yeah, look, I'm a lawyer, that's my first career. Precedent matters. I may not agree with something, and I may not like it, but we do in this country honor precedent, we do honor laws. This is America, this is Texas, we do honor property rights here. Would I, if it was fresh in 2015 or 2019, vote for 1/3 acre lots? No, I wouldn't.
Today you would?
You know what? I respect a landowner and a widow landowner who is requesting, would you please do what the town had agreed to do in 2004, 2005. And I think we should respect that. I think she deserves that. Is it popular? Nope, I can tell by the crowd tonight. And you know what? But I respect that.
Thank you. Okay, so let me just make a point, once again, on this pretty picture map. This one. What we're saying is that town center is zoned town center. Anything that's permitted in the town center ordinance may be done anywhere in the town center. In other words, on this map, does anyone in this room think that because there is a lake on this map, that landowner is only allowed ever to have a lake on their lot? They can't do anything but put a lake on it. I don't think there's anybody here that believes that. That goes for everything on this map. It's all a conceptual plan, which means that if we don't like what the Williams Ranch is requesting and we turn that down, tomorrow, we could have a developer in here that wants to put houses on the third acre. Right now, Mr. Siciliano has put most of the houses, or even all of the houses, on the eastern side closest to the estate at a half acre, not a third, but a half. Right? So it's been further in our third acre, or close to it. But the point is he has tried very hard to put the largest lots economically he could put closest to the estates of Copper Canyon. Now, you may not like that, but the point is that if we turn that down, let's say, well, it doesn't fly. That means that the next guy that comes in and wants to put 1/3 acre lots across the whole thing, or maybe wants to put a Whataburger there, or maybe he wants to put some other kind of commercial development. If you look at the ordinance, there's only a few things that are excluded, right? It says you can do commercial establishments except car washes, auto body shops, collision. I mean, there's a few things, you can't put a sewage treatment plant in there. I mean, there's some things you can't put in there, but otherwise it's pretty wide open. So this whole area, and let's just face this squarely tonight, because we're gonna have to deal with it again. This is not the last time we're gonna be talking about things being built in the town center. And I will correct Larry, which I almost never do, he's a lawyer, I don't like to correct lawyers. The south side, the town center south, which is not the discussion tonight, was 1/4 acre. Not 1/3, north was 1/3, south was 1/4. In the zoning at the time. Okay, so just to be clear, when people go, oh, the Vickery, that's awful. You could have had 1/4 acre down there perfectly legally too. So, we're not gonna revisit Vickery, that's water under the bridge or over the dam or however you wanna look at it, we're only talking about the north side tonight. But 1/3 acre is permitted anywhere in the town center. So, you may ask a question on that point, yes.
Just on that, you said the shell is half acre? And that's your pretty picture here actually.
Pretty
says
picture.
3/4?
This whole town center, everything that's on this map, except for that little yellow block up at the top, because that's what we're trying to fix tonight. At the time, we believed it was part of the town center. Anywhere in this town center, all of it could be 1/3 acre. All of it.
Thank you.
And I, for one, don't want that. I'm not proposing it. Dave? We've got a ton of public comments. I've got a number of you have signed up, and I know a number of you want to speak. I have some that were, that I would like to read first, or going.
Yeah, development.
Okay, well, Dave's all set up. It's times like this, I wish I could do shadow puppets. But I guess I'd ask Dave, is there anything new that you got to say tonight, other than what you said before? I mean,
Many people here who've not heard these presentations.
all right, that's fair enough, Robin. Okay, Dave, you and your team are up.
Okay, thank you. I stayed awake through all this, so I can't remember the president.
Granted.
Okay, this is Leon, Sustainable Development. You've heard my presentation before, a lot of you. I wanted to take just a second to reinforce what's been said about what's going on in the marketplace. I want to give you just a little bit of marketplace information, just a minute, or so you understand the economics you're fighting in the marketplace. A lot of people are saying, we want to keep this ad, we want to do this or that. But you need to understand the demand in the DFW area and in your area. And that's what you're kind of fighting on this 407 carrier area. That was always envisioned to be a town center. That was always to be the higher density commercial retail area, and later you'll have single family. You can see we're 29,000 jobs, 23,900 jobs from being at the unemployment rate we were before COVID hit. We're almost completely recovered. A lot of places, you know, in the country haven't. We've got 14,000 starts this quarter in homes. That's very strong. Homes that take a little longer to build. We've got finished vacant lots, very under the normal supply. We've got 0.8 of a month of finished vacant lots on the ground that builders buy to build homes on. And it's normally a 2 to 2.5 month supply. Your economics in this submarket are stronger than this. I'm giving you DFW overall. Vacant lots on the ground in the DFW area are 13.7 months to normally 24 months. But I'm trying to just build a picture here. There's just tremendous demand for good single family in the marketplace. Existing home sales are below where they're supposed to be, 1.3 months supply versus 6 months supply. Without looking at the slide, can anybody tell me where the Victory Estates, what house prices start today based on their website?
99,000.
$995. They're trying to show they're under $1 million. These are going to be priced higher. Toll Brothers is one of the builders I'm talking to. They're looking at this as a move-up product from where they are. These will be homes that should be over $1 million in value. I think it's very reasonable to think these 35 homes, once they're constructed and people have bought them and moved in, which is 4 years or 5 years from now, probably, could have a $40 million higher value. So it's that kind of value and the taxes those people pay because they're not an ag that support the kind of things we're talking about in the city, that use the finances to repair roads and do other things that you need. It's very beneficial. We have private streets. You won't have to maintain the streets. We have a storm sewer system that's private. We're putting in a water system that's private. The city won't have to maintain any of that. The city will have to maintain a septic or sanitary sewer system because that's connected into Flower Mound. And we don't have a way to keep that private. That has to connect into them. So just to give you an overview of the economics that are out there. So some people say, well, I'd rather keep my property ag. There's some people that have some very low values and they're paying very low taxes. These will be over $1 million homes and they will be paying the normal tax rate. You can't do an ag on 1/3, 1/2 acre lot. So this will be a pretty substantial income to the city. I put a little slide in here on our background. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. The builders you see in the middle are all builders that are going into a subdivision I developed in the past or been the principal operating person for in the past. We know most of the major builders in Metroplex. We have very good choices here. We have trees, Toll Brothers, and partners in building that have all given me written expressions of interest to build these lots. So I think they're going to have very high quality builder choices. We'll choose one of those. We can't finalize an agreement to one until we know we're approved to develop something. But those are the choices we have. And I've got to tell you, if I open this up, I would have a lot of other builder choices. We're a small company, and I don't really want. I had a subdivision years ago where we had 26 builders that wanted to go in. And we could only pick 4. So I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to work with good folks and bring it in.
So let's go to our vision. Town center has been talked about already. You can do retail in here in town center. You can do office in town center, or you can do residential. We think this eliminates a big unknown for y'all. I mean, go in here and have these 35 lots, and we'll talk about the sizes and all. And this is 1.6 to the acre. This is not 3 to the acre. This isn't Lantana. It's a very difficult site to develop. We'll talk about that a little bit. But you're going to have a private gated community, much like what Victory is, what State's Copper Canyon to the east is. This will be a single entrance, private street, gated community. The water features at the beginning we'll show you. We'll have plan development standards, which are in the PD ordinance, which council member the P&Z member gave a copy of. And we'll have covenants, codes, and restrictions that will govern the quality within the HOA, rapid forming HOA, and maintain quality there. Do you want to show just a couple elevations, Doug? We just get a feel for.
What slide?
Yeah, if you stay in the presentation subfolder, let's just stay on development, stay in the presentation subfolder, go up one. Yeah, there's elevations in there. Okay, you go up one level. I'm sorry. Okay, you go up one level to the back one level. Oh, yeah, there you go. See, go over that.
Gotcha.
Well, I'll just give you a quick feel for this. Some of these are tow. We have tow that wants to go in. We have Breeze that wants to go in. We have partners in building. So we just give you a feel for the type of home that we're talking about over here. Just give you a little bit of a feel. So this isn't Lantana. This isn't even what Weekly's doing on the east side of Germany. Those homes start with 600. So this is a step up from there. We have, I believe, our concept plan next. Is that right in our slides? So we have these. If anybody wants to see these, we can stay. We don't need these. Everybody here and go through them, but we can stay and go through it. So we go back to our presentation. Then if you would. And there's our location. I think you all know where it is. Miss Williams is in the back of the room, if any of you don't know her. Can you hold your hand up? Well, it's Miss Williams. How long have you lived there?
We bought the place in the 80s, more than a lot of people were not even born at the time.
But you live in Double Oak now.
Pardon?
You live in Double Oak.
As close as I could get.
Yeah, you moved there years ago.
Oh, yeah, we moved in the 80s.
Anyway, I'm sure you're familiar with the location. This is an aerial photograph of the site. When we get into the concept plan, I'll show you, we'll get into trees and what we're trying to do. But because of the way we have to put a center street in here and the way we have to grade, we can't really keep the trees in the middle of the site. We can keep the trees to the east and to the north, and we'll work, we can't keep the ones along the fence to the west. But by the time you put in utilities and roads and pads for homes, most of the trees in the center of the site are going to have to go. And I'm going to spend just a second talking to you about what we're trying to do to buffer on the east side and all. It's an L-shaped site, as you can see. When concept plans were discussed by people that spent a lot of time on them, I think they envisioned all the landowners cooperating. And we don't have that. We have Kent, Victory, or the Victory family that thinks they want to wait for commercial to occur on their track, which is the track to our immediate west. So that leaves us an L-shaped track. That's what Ms. Williams currently has. It's very challenging to develop. All we can really do is put a center street in with lots on each side. We put in lots that were equal size to start with. Then we met with people from the States of Copper Canyon, from the Shackelford family, and talked to them. We did all we could to buffer the folks to the east and to the north by moving the street as much to the west as we could and to the south as we could. And what that did is that meant that everything to the east and to the north is at least a half an acre in size.
Everything facing the Vickery tract to the south and to the west is 1/3 of an acre or larger. There's nothing smaller than 1/3 of an acre. To give you some idea, we had to, on that northwest side is low. We have to bring a lot of fill in to raise that. The town went through a lot of work to get Flower Mound to provide city sewer on this. These are not septic tanks. I've had people ask me that several times. There are no septic tanks on this site. This is all city sewer. So we will put a lift station on the far left side, the far western side. The sewer will drain to that lift station and then go back down the center road, across Justin Road, over to Toll Brothers' site, and we'll hook into the sanitary sewer at a connection point by a main there, by a manhole there. And that's worked out, by the way. We've got materials and location worked out. We've got an agreement circulating. We're not going to finalize the agreement until we know this is approved. We also had to work out a joint entrance here, and I won't go into all the reasons why we had to do that. But TxDOT standards force the entrance to be to the west of the site. If we put it on the very western part of our site, it would make the Vickeries move their entrance way over. The natural point to put a joint entrance was across from Toll Brothers. And that's what we've agreed to do. The Vickery family has agreed to work with us to donate the land to the town for us to go and put the entrance in. We will maintain the entrance and we will install the entrance. The town will have no expense there. So there's, we'll have to talk to Bob. I don't know if it's an actual tri-party agreement, but obviously we have to have an agreement with the Vickeries, with the town. Yes, the Vickeries and I have agreed to terms, and we'll circulate something to the town to make sure it meets their standards. So let's go to the portal salvo view. Do you want to discuss that just a second, Brad?
I'm Doug Powell, I'm an urban planner with Adams, a local engineering and design firm. We were working with Mr. Siciliano on this project. The adjacency to properties to the east has always been an issue. So we put together this, I did not, but our staff did, put together this exhibit that shows what's typical setback and house setback from the state's Copper Canyon. There is a 60-foot driveway, which actually that also adds to the link between the backside of the lots in Williams Ranch and then the estates of Copper Canyon. But you can see the setbacks. Mr. Siciliano was also written into development standards that we will plant trees along that eastern property line to help with the visibility of those houses. So again, we put this together to kind of show what's the approximate location distance between back of houses, which is 100 feet, and we kind of show represent what's going to happen when the new houses get built. There's discussion about whether these houses are 2 stories or 1 story. We think that there's going to be a mixture of that, but we have shown 2 story in this perspective.
So let me see if I can make that clearer, and we'll show you an aerial in a second. The Shackleford's private drive is 60 feet long. This room is about 40 feet long. So the drive is as wide as 1.5 of these rooms. If you go from that wall to that wall, we measured it earlier, it's about 40 feet. That driveway is 60 feet wide. So between the people to the east and our property line is 60 feet to start with. Then if you look at our front yard is a 30-foot setback. Our pads are 90 feet. It's 120 feet. The lots are 200 feet deep. So there's 80 feet between our property line and what would be the back of the house. If the biggest house that we envision going there on the back is built, that's 2 rooms this size. I'm just trying to give you a visual of how far apart we are from the property line of the states of Copper Canyon. They have trees buffering on their side. They have a 6-foot board-on-board fence.
And then they had building setbacks behind that. So that's the closest we would be to a house over there. I hope that helps everybody understand what we're trying to do there. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, we're putting an 8-foot board-on-board fence on the east side of our property, along our property line. And we agreed to do that in the PD ordinance, that you know.
And Dave, one of the things, the Shackelfords have trees and things on their property.
Yes.
You're not touching those.
Now, what we've done, can you go to the next slide? This is a grading plan, and what I've tried to do is put on here, and it's in the PD, or we circulated this, and we can attach it to the PD ordinance or whatever you want to do. These are the trees we're trying to keep that are existing trees that are there. So on that fence line on the east side and on the north, we've drawn lines and we've shown the dimensions. Now, what happens is we have to grade these lots, so the back of the lot's higher than the front of the lot, so they all drain to the street. So some of these are real flat, like in the bottom right, lots 1 through 9 if you go down to Justin Road and you start going north on the east side, that's very flat. We have to fill there, raise the back of the lot so the water will come to the street. So what we're going to try and do is keep enough room behind there to keep the trees a distance of between 10 and 20 feet. When we actually get out there and survey the site and mark it and everything else, we'll be able to tell exactly. And we also have to have an arborist look at that, because if there's a sick tree, we don't want to give a new homeowner a tree they got to take down within a year. So we'll look at that too. That's all things we'll do as we move forward in the development process. So we're trying to show that we put half-acre lots to the east and to the north to screen people. We're trying to keep the trees along the fence line as much as we can. And then what we will do is where the trees thin out, some places those trees are pretty thick. Some places they thin out, like when you get above lot 9 in the middle, the trees thin out. We say the builder has to plant 2 trees behind his house in the backyard to screen the folks to the east if the natural trees aren't providing screen. I can't do. I'm sorry?
Do you have a copy to share with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, and we put the dimensions in there. Now, once if we get approved and we move forward, and we go in there, start doing the details, we'll be able to pin down. We want to keep as much as we can, but we got to make it grading work. We can't get people sick trees that aren't working. There's a real nice stand of pines on the first 4 or 5 or 6 lots up there. And I've got a couple of pictures I'll show you. So if you want to go to the next picture. This is a picture from where the back of the house would be on lot 5, which is just north of Janae's house. If we would be just north of your pool. I couldn't get closer here. If I go to the right, which would be south, the trees are thicker. This is where the trees now are over there. And if you go to the next slide, just to give you an idea, this is from our property line looking directly east. So you understand we have to go across that 60-foot private easement, that's a road. And then the Estates of Copper Canyon has trees buffering their side. And they're some of those are 35 feet tall, some of them are, way down to 15 feet, but there's a pretty good buffer there, I think. And then along Justin Road, what we envision is columns. This Williams is going to pick out a font. She has several font choices, but we want to put WR on the columns, have the space Justin, so when you drive by, you'll see that wrought iron. We have a water feature there, and we'll put a berm there. So we'll have a nice dry ride when you go by on Justin Road. And then if you go to the vision board, we haven't picked an entrance yet, but we've gone to the builders and said, these are your choices. They're going to pick the most expensive one. but we're saying within this, these are kind of your choices. So we have a single point of access, as you know, which fire is approved because we're putting sprinklers in all homes. We have an advantage in town center because you've got that city sewer. The town went through a great deal of effort to get sanitary sewer, so we didn't have to have septic tanks on these lots. But you've got to pay for that sewer. And if we don't have density, we can't reimburse Flower now for the use of the sewer. So this does it. We have to pay dollar amount and impact fee. We have to oversize our lines so future town center folks can connect. And we have to put in a lift station. This is a very expensive undertaking. People say, well, why can't you do lower density? The numbers just simply don't work. We're also putting in, does anybody know what the impact fees are to your water cooperative for 1-inch meters? $13,000 a house. $13,000 a house. Plus, we have to put in the water lines. So it's expensive to do all this. And luckily, you have builder choices and prices that will allow that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to afford to do this kind of thing. So we've coordinated with town staff on the lift station. I believe Chris, you verified capacities there. So we've gone through all that with Chris. We coordinated with cross timbers. They've agreed to the water that we've got in there. And we, because of these extraordinary costs, we want to come back to these later and see if we can recoup some of that from future years, but we're not getting into that tonight. Now, we have a whole PD ordinance. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what you want to do there. If you want, all our development standards have been submitted to you in a PD ordinance. I don't know if you want to spend time on that, or you want somebody else to, or you want me to.
Your application, go for it.
Okay. I guess what I'd like to explain is we've got a whole set of written standards in here that we have to comply with. And it sets out a lot of what I've just given you as far as a concept plan, as far as our setbacks, as far as the elevation of the home. We have a 30-foot front yard setback from the street. It shouldn't matter why it's a private gated community. We all shouldn't be under what you're visiting or servicing the house. But the garages are going to be 30 feet back from the street. So remember, this is 40 feet. So about 3/4 of the distance of this room will be where the house setbacks are. We can put some things into the setback a little bit if we do a front porch that sits out of a column. We have some flexibility there. And I didn't print off the PD ordinance. Do we have a printed copy of that, or do you want to go over a couple of them?
One of the things is, really, you can't pass an ordinance, but you can approve the zoning request with the development regulations and all the exhibits. So by way of not making this any longer than it has to be, everything that you have presented tonight in terms of pictures and streetscape or setbacks, all those things are in the development regulations to ensure the town can enforce and that you will keep your promise, not that you wouldn't. But that you would have, we've written the regulations, so the regulations will apply to this development. Remember, I told you there's two things we could do: establish the boundaries and establish the regulations within those boundaries. He has submitted proposal to do everything he is representing to you that he will do when if this gets approved, or there's a recommendation for approval and subsequently approved by council. That includes the elevations, the entry feature, all of the things about setbacks, height, all those things are addressed in the development regulations. So that will make this developer adhere to that, they won't get a building permit. That's how the legislative and regulatory scheme goes. So that's why when we're changing the zoning, if we're entertaining the next step in the zoning process with regard to this town center, we're writing the regulations so that the developer will do what he is presenting to you that he will do. So that you have some assurance that what goes up there is what he's promised.
And also just to kind of elaborate on that just a hair bit, we are making a recommendation to the council. The council actually does the approval of the ordinance. So you can talk to us tonight, which will get another chance to say the same thing again, council in a month, roughly,
11/22.
11/22. So in advance of your Thanksgiving, you come in and just shoot council out. So just don't waste all of your energy on us tonight, save some money.
And if there's a development regulation that needs to be tweaked or changed, it can be changed between now and the council. So,
The draft.
and so we have a draft proposal, you make a recommendation, either up or down, based on, if you vote to approve, obviously, I would assume you want all the conditions, which are all the exhibits, which have been presented and talked about tonight in terms of elevation, entry feature, setbacks, etc.
Mr. Chairman, in light of tonight's discussion earlier, as you see, when I put together the presentation, we started with Exhibit C. Exhibit A is meets and bounds description of the property. That has, I think, been verified by engineer to make sure we incorporate the way it was tracked. And B is the concept. And so we've already shown the concept. But part of the ordinance would have meets and bounds description, concept plan, and then the next few pages, which details, the only thing that really we hadn't talked about is just like Toll Brothers, the Victory Development has light standards that are higher quality than typical light. We have those in the development standards per the request of staff.
Okay. That it?
Yes, sir. I mean, we can go on, but I think we've covered.
No, I think that's more than
Detail, sorry.
Let me also kind of reiterate or make a couple of points that enhance what's been said. The town has a 20-year economic plan. This is, what we've got to do to look at our future. And it's based on both Town Center North and Town Center South developing out as, based on our expert, Steve Hill. So when we look ahead at our budget, there is an assumption in our future 20-year budgets that Town Center does get developed some way or another. I'm not going to tell you how Steve does it. I don't know. You can discuss that with him. And given that our recent reduction in the property tax, I hope everybody enjoys the reduction in the property tax. That's a direct result of the increase in revenues because of the Vickery development. So you may hate Vickery, but you did get some benefit. However, this will not be sustainable without the fulfillment of Town Center North development, which means your taxes will go up if Town Center North doesn't get developed. Keep that in mind. So every property on Justin Road on the north side is under an ag exemption. They mentioned that. As all of you know, ag exemption means that the town doesn't get very much from that property. Converting ag exempt property to commercial or residential helps the town pay for the future roads. That's how we pay for what goes on in this town. If the Vickeries are correct, and if we want commercial development in the town center, the remaining portion of Town Center North, they mentioned the sewer line, because we talked earlier this evening about sewers. The sewer line for this property comes from the south through Flower Mound. It is not cross timbers. It has absolutely nothing to do with what Donna talked about earlier about the certificate authority to cross timbers. This is Flower Mound water sewer process. The developer has agreed to bring it under Justin, bring it to his property and supersize it so that it won't only serve his property, will serve the future development, the rest of Town Center. That's a big benefit for the town because it does make the Vickery's property much more valuable and therefore more marketable and therefore greater taxes for us. So there's a big benefit built into what Dave was saying, or what the developer's plan is. The other landowner that's actually between the states and this property is the Shackelford family. They have that driveway. So obviously their opinion is fairly important, but they're right adjacent to it. And also north, from the north of this property as well. Those of you who were here heard Jean Shackelford come in and say she is in favor of this particular development plan. She thinks it's very good. It's not a perfect solution, there isn't one, but this is, this particular development has a good reputation, the developer has a good reputation, seems to have a good plan, and she is in favor of it. The other issue that they mentioned, and I think is fairly important, is any of us who drive back and forth on 407 for any reason past this property recognize that once Vickery is up, that's going to be a pretty busy intersection with all those people coming out on 407, turning left, turning right. It's going to be a mess. There's been hope been expressed that XDOT would put a light in there. Well, the traffic counts have to be at a certain level. Engineer talked to us about that. It doesn't appear to be there. But by adding this property to it, and these residential units may help, and also the way the alignment has done to align this entrance with the Vickery entrance enhances the likelihood that we're going to get a light there, which would be great for everybody, including a bunch of journeymen. What else?
Can you explain why we did for everybody? I'm curious.
I'm sorry?
Can you explain why we did for everybody? I don't like it.
Well, because if you drive across there, you don't want people swinging out in front of you when you're going past at 60 miles an hour.
That's true everywhere though.
Yeah, but here we're gonna have a lot of people coming in and out. It's like, it's one thing to have a driveway from your house. Another thing, when you've got 400 homes all coming out, turning left in front of you. So it makes for a much safer intersection. Personally, that's not the TxDOT and their evaluation, but also, I mean, let's be honest, people coming west on 407 will need to turn into this development. People coming out of this development may want to turn to go east. That means they're going to have to go across the median to go east. A light there would be much safer for both directions rather than have to go halfway and then go out there. So, again, in the best of all possible worlds, we wouldn't have traffic lights. We'd have lovely turning circles like we have up here in Chin Chapel. But I think there's just way too much traffic. So again, that the traffic counts on that. And then going back in time, and again, this is a philosophy, you don't have to agree to it. There was a philosophy that the reason town center was done was that 407 is commercial. I mean, I don't think any of us are gonna say that 407 is not commercial. We look at the shopping center down here, the Kroger down there, and the CVS and the Pizza Hut down there. I mean, it's a very commercial street. Part of the concept, as Larry mentioned, going back in the midst of time, was that if we recognize that that's going to be commercial, we might as well just accept that and put commercial there, and that would provide the taxes to keep the whole rest of the town, which is not on a highway, rural. So there was at the time, it was specifically mentioned in minutes of the meetings at that time that was part of the plan, was to, in essence, sacrifice part of the town in the busiest intersection, the busiest road, to create revenue to help us preserve the rest of the town. You don't have to agree with that or not, but that was part of the philosophy. Okay, so I think it's time, we've all been waiting for public comment. Before we start taking from the public, I do have a list, a stack of people here. We did have a couple of submissions to the website of people who were unable to be here, including anonymous users. I'm writing regarding the P&Z meeting on 11/1. I haven't been completely up to speed, but I'm shocked to see potential residential development on 1/3 and 1/2 acre plots. Development like this is why many town residents come here. We don't want to live in Flower Mound or Island Village. We just had an election where both mayoral candidates were trying to out-rural each other, and then I see this. I don't understand it, and I'm completely against this. I cannot attend the meeting this evening, but hope my email will be heard. And that was Scott Brown. This is from Dwight and Julie Dilworth. We will not be able to attend the P&Z meeting on November 2021, but we'd like to send our strenuous objection to the proposed rezoning of 10 acres west of the estates of Copper Canyon. Over the objections of many citizens, the 2020 master plan was approved. That plan zoned these 10 acres as 3/4 acre transitional lots. It's not a true statement. Now, a year later, rezoning is being requested again. And again, many citizens are expressing objections. Please listen to us and abide by the plan. Otherwise, the 2020 master plan is not worth the paper it's presented on, which it's not. This is from George Lumer, and this was to Sheila. It said, "Hi Sheila, I appreciate it if you read my comments to the zoning change agenda tonight for tonight's P&Z meeting and include them in the minutes of the meeting. They are as follows. 2 members of the Copper Canyon Planning and Zoning Committee. I vehemently oppose the proposed zoning change from R2 on the 10.5 acres covered by tonight's meeting for the following reasons. 1, the citizens of the town recently spent approximately $65,000 on a master plan that contemplated 3/4 acre lots on some of the town center. We did that out of respect for our residents that live in the estates of Copper Canyon. Mayor Ron went so far in one of the council meetings dealing with the master plan to offer assurance to the residents of the estates of Copper Canyon that the acreage buffering the development would remain 3/4 acres. A lot of the time and money went into the master plan, and now we are changing it. This makes no sense, and what has happened to the respect for our neighbors in the estates of Copper Canyon. Number 2, are we following the correct legal procedure for a zoning change? I'd like to see a written legal opinion from the town's council to this effect. By going through the process with P&Z, we are creating a legal fee trap for this. Are we creating a legal fee trap for the town? Being a retired attorney, I am all in favor of legal fees, unless I have to pay them. The town has spent too much money on legal fees in the past to correct mistakes, for example, the annexation of Copper Creek. Why have malpractice claims not been filed against the law firms that represented the town in these past mistakes? Not relevant to tonight. 3, with this change, are we favoring the landowner developer versus the other landowners in the town center? If high density lots are permitted, it appears that this landowner and developer will be able to capture a disproportionate amount of the sewage treatment capacity allocated to the north side of 407 by Flower Mound. When other portions of the town center develop later, will there be enough sewage capacity for them? This is especially true since the high density development is permitted. The other landowners in the town center will also want high density development. So a couple of points on that. Personally, I don't consider half acre to be high density. I think that is apartments, but it's definition. And thirdly, we've already answered that question in terms of sewage. There's absolutely plenty of capacity, and our town engineer can help us with that if anybody wants a question. We won't go into it now, but this is a very small part of the capacity. Even the victories, I won't say it's a drop in the bucket, perhaps a bad one, but it takes a large portion of capacity. There's still plenty of capacity for the rest of the town center development. So it's a good question, but it's asked and answered in prior commission. Okay. Any other forms that come in since you had to do this back?
Peter Vickery's, there should be a fourth
No, exactly.
one.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll go through the ones I've got in order, and then if there's.
It's not behind the other emails that I gave you.
No.
I can read it. I have.
All right, if you read it.
Okay. This is from Peter Vickery. The 20-year pro rata.
I read all of those.
Pardon?
I did all of those.
Oh, you did?
That's I did a free form instead of reading them strictly. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
That was coming. His comments on page Chris.
Okay.
All right, so
I think we would like that, go ahead and do that.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll read them all again to you exactly as they were. It'll be a bit repetitive.
I think either one would be great.
Okay, you didn't say that? Okay. But this came in from Donald Welch. Number 1, The 20-year pro-rata economic plan for the city's future is based on both TCS and TCN developing out as created by CC's own resident financial expert, Councilman Stephen Hill. 2, given CC's recent reduction in the property tax as a direct result of the increase of revenues because of the TCS development, however, this will not be sustainable without the fulfillment of TCN development plan as mentioned above. 3, every property on Justin Road on the north side is under an ag exemption and thereby contributing very little financially to the city currently. As long as they remain on ag exemption, TCN will go unfulfilled as being an important contributor to sustaining CCN's financial responsibilities in the future. 4, if the town wants commercial development on TCN, the Williams Ranch is the path to get there because it gets the waste pipeline across the road and to the TCN proximity at no cost to the public. 5, as Jeannie Shackelford spoke at a previous public meeting, while a housing development is not a perfect solution from her perspective, she is convinced that David Siciliano will build a very nice development, and that is so much nicer than what may otherwise go in there. Not an exact quote, but a fair paraphrase, I think. 6, if CC wants a traffic light for safety reasons, which seems to be almost universally desired, the Williams Ranch is the best chance to get that as well. The recent attempt to redefine the definition of TCN by removing 10 acres to the eastern edge is nothing less than a transparent attempt to kill the Williams Ranch development by creating an untenable change in the economics of the project. I'm not aware of any movement like that, so I don't know what that's a reference to. 8, several years ago, the traffic count on Justin Road, Copper Canyon, was 43 to 47,000 per day. It can only be higher now. Let us make the best use of the Justin Road corridor as the heavy lifter of financial benefits and property tax revenue for Copper Canyon. This will allow the areas of Copper Canyon that are more rural to remain rural. This will maintain low or even decreasing property tax rates for others. I think I covered all of those almost exactly in my previous comments. All right, drum roll. First, public is Robin. And again, we will stick by the rule we have in the past, 3 minutes, subject to discretion. But she'll give time, people.
So I'm Robin Douglas Davis, 581 Jernigan Road. I heard a quote the other day that I felt summarized the situation perfectly. There is never a right way to do a wrong thing. And I feel like that's what's happening here. Although the vast majority of our residents, over 80 to 90%, in our survey for the master plan, and y'all should know that I was on the master plan committee, that 80 to 90% of our residents wanted large estate lots throughout. The master plan committee felt we were bound by previous zoning ordinance. It turns out the zoning ordinance for the northern half of the parcel in question didn't limit the master plan committee or the town council at all. It was R2, which we wanted the whole time. Our elected officials ran on a platform of maintaining our rural nature. This entity does not do that. Did the 2014-2015 council, who were in office at the time of this change, desire to protect the current residents by adding the 3/4 or larger lot sizes in the adjacent area? Yes. Minutes of the meeting reflect statements made by the council expressing the intention to maintain larger lot sizes. What do our words mean? Do we stand by what we believe and say? Was the situation we're in now the result of an error? Yes. Does leaving it R2 meet the needs and desires of the town? Absolutely. Does it provide the opportunity to do the right thing? Most definitely. I urge you to vote against changing the zoning and do the right thing and maintain the larger R2 lot size for this northern 10 acres. This maintains the rural nature of our oasis. Listen to the people. Your neighbors and our citizens deserve that. Thank you.
So for future reference, I think everyone is entitled to their own opinion. That is certainly true. However, I don't think everybody's entitled to their own facts. There are certain facts on the record. I think we need to stick to the facts as much as possible. So that said, let's go to Catherine Bex.
Hello, my name is Catherine Bexler. I'm at 4536 Mahogany Lane. I have been here in the town of Copacanes since 1994. I've seen it develop. And I was originally at all the meetings in 2004, 2005, when Sherry got was mayor, and as it continued on with the plan development. Moving fast forward, 2015, 2016, being on the HOA board in my community, we were concerned about the development that was being presented. And we had many meetings with Mayor Sue at the time, some of the council members at the time, and try to work with all this. And it was always said to us that there would be a 3/4 acre estate transition. So we believed it. And we worked with that. That's what we thought. So here to find out in 2019 that we're going through all of these changes in all the meetings in 2020 via Zoom. We're going through all of these pretty pictures. And here we are, we're actually putting down an estate transition. But they're telling us that, well, it's just a pretty picture, it's nowhere written anywhere. So as I'm going through deeper into the paperwork, I'm looking at the zoning chapter 14, 2.103, where it's displaying or talking about the town center. And it's referencing certain ordinances. And then I'm looking at these ordinances, and in 1508, under residential uses, it talks about estate transition. And it talks about uses, character, and proposed intent of this area. And it all is referencing the safety companion, it's referencing the state transition from larger lots to smaller lots. And so I'm thinking, well, okay, well, this is an ordinance. So how can it not be actual black on white? So I'm thinking, okay, then 1601, it further references under the same area, section D, town center district, and it says on Article E that town center district residential detached family, detached single family, estate transition lots, lot sizes in this area of the town center conforming to the master plan are designated as estate transition and shall be in minimum of 3/4 acre. So how are we not to believe that we were getting 3/4 acre lots for a resident? Now, Mr. Siciliano had a great presentation, but I thought that the one picture that he presented doesn't quite give you the exact, I'm sorry.
She got
It doesn't give you the exact layout. Each one of the lots on the estate.
Yeah, thank you. That's just a sample. That's not intended.
But I understand, but there's 2 homes to each one of our lots, and in some cases, 4. So I just wanted to point out that that's
Thank
not quite, anyway. That's, I hope you.
You want more time? You want more time?
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, do you want my time to talk though?
Oh, no, okay, I'm done, thank you.
Thank you.
Was there a question in there to ask?
Those particular ordinances that she referred to did not change the order, they zoning, they changed the descriptions of what things would be that would fit in those categories. That's a fair way to put it. It also defined what a single family house was, what a commercial was, and what was not. So it didn't designate any areas of state transition. It said if someone wanted a state transition as part of their PD, when the town was zoned, it would have to meet those requirements. So, and it is very confusing. I don't think it was well written at the time, and I can't help that. But unfortunately, as you heard from our attorney, it did not change the zoning ordinance such as it was. And there are minutes, as Robin referred to, where, in fact, she referred to specific minutes where our town council says specifically in the minutes that north of 407 is zone 1/3 and south is zone 1/4 in the minutes of those meetings. So there was a lot of discussion going both ways. Obviously, it's a free-form discussion, much like we're having. And some people said, well, I want an acre. And other people said, well, no, then it won't be viable. And it ended up being staying at 1/3 from council of north. And Ms. Newton.
Hi, my name is Janae Newton. I'm at 4553 in Hogging Lane. I've been up here several times. Basically, I don't have anything against Mr. Williams. Mentioning many times, and we're down to this back and forth, before the state's transition. Bob Hager is saying that the map attached to the ordinance, that there has to be a balance between neighbors, and we just feel like a constant bait and switch with the estates of the transition. If that is what was necessary, if the lawyer for our town is supposed to be, for both of us, then at the time that we were all spending, which is precious to all of us, then that's what should have been said. Not just a pretty picture, not just all the money spent, not all of the citizens' time putting forth what was the intention. The estates of transition isn't going to be over by the CBS over at Chin Chapel. It's not going to be over in the corner over here. It's not going to be, it's going to be next to us. They want the 3/4. And if what was necessary is that there was supposed to be zoning, then I submit if a mistake was made and we found that, Chris did something or whatever, and that's to be corrected, then I submit that we need to have some zoning put forth. If this is not going to go forward with the Williams development, and somebody could come and put 1/3, then let's get this corrected. Let's get zoning done. Because that's what needs to happen so that we don't have to have this talk anymore. If there's a balance between neighbors, let's put that balance down for us.
Can I ask our legal counsel a question? This particular property is owned by Lillian Williams.
Correct.
Who has the right to ask us to change the zoning of that land?
Well, obviously, the property owner does.
Yes.
The council can initiate zoning on the property.
Okay.
It's
So-
statutorily permitted.
So, the answer to your point is that if you wish to change the zoning on that property to something other than Town Center North, you have two options. Well, you could buy it, own it, but that's presumably not your plan. You could ask the Williams family to change the zoning request, or you can petition the town council, not this. So I appreciate that you wish that you were different, but we've got to go through the proper channels.
I have a question. Why did we spend $60,000 on a pretty picture?
I think you could ask our mayor at the time that question, not me.
That sounds good.
If I can add to that. So, Bob, can you speak a little bit to, because I was on the master plan committee, as was Robin, as were several people. And the goal going into that was how do we create the buffer for people? And one of the things that we found was that because we first learned of the pretty picture before the new pretty picture was made, and how that fit relative to zoning. There are a set of, I think it's 6 or 7 things, I'm doing this from memory, that are permitted uses in the master plan, right, in the overall piece of that. Included transition, included 3rd acre, et cetera, including commercial. One of the questions that the committee asked the attorney was, can we ask the city to make a change to the zoning for that property? Absent the owner asking for that change. And that introduced the concept of adverse impact. Right? So the flip side of that is, if you ask the city to do it, and I'll ask you to explain what it is, then the flip side of that is that the owner can file suit for adverse impact against that. And so in making that change, your offset to that is you run the risk that the city will be sued by the landowner for what they provide.
Fair enough.
Well, now you have developers, so that makes it worse.
Likewise, I don't have a buffer.
Well, let's be honest. Everyone holds their property subject to the reasonable regulations and exercise of the police power. It's not absolute, either on the city side or on the adjacent property. You have to remember, we don't own this property. Ms. Williams and her family own this property. Remember that you own your property. There has to be a balance struck about our ability to regulate your land you live on, as well as the land owned in this case by Ms. Williams. So that's the balance. We all hold our properties subject to the reasonable regulation of the police power. For example, you couldn't preclude someone of Italian descent from owning land and property. That's arbitrary, capricious, it's illegal. So our ability to regulate property is not absolute. And to a certain extent, we have to honor the private property owner's right to develop their property within the ordinance. The ordinance specifically says for single-family residential development in town center, you can have estates transition, medium density, single family. It's defined as 30 acres, state transitional 3/4 acre, and then a planned development south of 407, which we don't need to talk about. Those cows have already left the best. So either one of those two residential uses are allowed in this district. I defy anyone to show me a zoning map that delineates the districts differently. And I told you, this concept plan doesn't even have 30. So you're telling me that this zoning ordinance no longer has 30 acre zoning in it because we adopted a master plan that doesn't have it on the map. That's not what your zoning ordinance says. Your zoning ordinance doesn't treat this property as having any particular zoning and any particular tract within the four corners of town center.
Okay, so, thank you. Before we go any further, could I ask you to like warm it up in here a little bit? I'm sitting here shivering.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's over here kind of quivering. So I don't, if it gets too hot for you all out there, let us know, we'll bring it back up. They got the bench right here trying to freeze us out. Okay. Thank you. Next is Jeff.
4548 Mahogany Lane. First off, very good explanation of everything on what happened and transpired. Sister Hyman did a great job. If that explanation, I went to some of them and maybe better attention to it. I see where you're going. It's a difficult thing. The only thing, well, first off, Ms. Williams, I'm very sorry I didn't know your husband passed away 2 years ago. I understand I'm sorry for your loss. So, but the thing is, I think, like you said earlier, that it was the intent of what they meant to do. I think that a lot of people are reading the intent of this 3/4 acre transition. So there was an intent, because if somebody sitting on council now says it's 100% the reason, give us that 3/4 acre. Somebody else in past council, that's mayor, yes, that was the intent to give you 3. It never happened, and I understand the law that it's not there, but if the intent was there, why don't we look at that? I'm not saying not do it. I mean, your whole purpose of dealing with her, y'all said it was the intent to do it, so you're looking at that right now, which I understand and respect, but might also look at the intent of that 3/4 acre transition. I've only been here 4 years. I don't know all the past. Thank you for what y'all are doing. Mr. Rounding did a great job. Thank you for your explanation, but check out that intent of the 3/4 acre, if you could.
Well, I think, thank you, Jeff. Again, nobody on this commission was here when this was done, and almost nobody on the council was here when this was done. So,
Yes, sir.
and so unfortunately, failure to follow through can certainly be an issue, But unfortunately, we today are stuck with what we have. Right, and so, we can apologize or try and figure out how people kind of promise things and didn't do them. Sorry, I can't help with that. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but we have to deal with the facts on the table today, not what people hope or want. By the way, I think most of you people know, I actually have some nice longhorns grazing on my property. I like longhorns, and if it were up to me, if you make me God, we wouldn't do any development in this town. But unfortunately, again, we are subject to people's property rights. We're talking about Mrs. Williams' property rights here is what we're talking about. So within the range of the ordinances in the district. So I guess, Mr. Newton.
I'm good.
Thank you. Adrian Thomas, also Mahogany Lane.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for listening. I've been here for several years on the HOA board of the States of Cook County, and I've been following the development of the victories for quite some time. My question is, and I listened to your opinion. I appreciate everything you say. My question is there anything we can do to stop this, or is it just simply a done deal?
You asking me that question?
Yes.
Well, we've got a commission here, and then we've got council vote, so I can't answer that. I mean, it's
Because I would agree with what many people have said here. Despite the law, the town is not listening to the residents, right? And that, to Jeff's point about the intent, and obviously our particular interest is the estate's transition and the way it was drawn on a nice $65,000 pretty picture. We would ask that intent really be looked at, because that's what you talked about, protecting the state, protecting landowners and protecting residents. We would ask that you look to protect us in the states of Cook County. Thank you.
I guess I would reiterate the same. I assume you're related, or not different Newtons?
No, that was bad. I passed.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's Adrian. Okay. I would. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I would reiterate the comment I made earlier. Yeah, as you may like. Okay.
Yeah.
You may certainly buy Mrs. Williams' land if you'd like. You may petition the town council, and that's it. So when you say it's a done deal, no, but I mean, obviously I don't personally make the decision. And the other side of this is if you don't like this deal, again, I ask you, will you like a Whataburger right there next door to with a drive-through parking lot? Because that could also be an issue there. Again, we're talking about almost $1 million homes. And whether they're a half acre or 3/4 acre, we're not talking about, garbage dumpsters in the backyard of an apartment building.
The only comment I would make about the half acre versus a third of an acre that you have drawn on the plan there, they're the same width, they're just longer. So in terms of how many, actually butt up to the estates of Cook County, whether it's a half acre or a third acre, it doesn't matter.
Fair enough.
So I understand. I want you to understand what I see, and I'm having a difficult time.
Make sure you're.
If this picture shows the state's transition on all of the yellow, can we agree on that?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to read to you the ordinance.
You get a little closer to your mind.
Yeah, I'm going to read you the ordinance.
What ordinance number is it?
It is ordinance, the town center. (2-103). And if you go to single family residences, all right, you got the map and it shows yellow. It says lot sizes in those areas of the town component of the master plan designated as estates transition shall be a minimum of 3/4 acres in size. Right? Then it goes on to say in subsection 2, lot sizes in that area of the town center component of the master plan designated as medium density, single family and located on 407 shall be a minimum of 1/3 acres in size. Exactly identical, except for 1/3 and 3/4 are the only differences. Can someone on this map show me where there's 1/3 acre?
That's a pretty picture.
That's right, because it's not on here.
Yeah, that's,
And as a result of that, you can't interpret those two passages to incorporate this map. No, that picture is different than this picture, no doubt. My suggestion to you, this picture is meaningless. Because the zoning ordinance doesn't designate on the zoning map. This is not a zoning map.
we've got a bunch more people to go through here that may have valuable things to add. Ted, I saw your hands up. Ted did say he wanted to speak. I don't know where he's in a pack here somewhere. So.
Just to answer your question, Bob, back in 2015, the council and P&Z met in a joint session. And they stated that they understand that the area along the west side of the estates of Copper Canyon is designated as a estates transition. They have identified the location. They haven't given you the coordinates, but they said it's the west side. They said the same thing to the east side.
Tell me what the west side is. You tell me.
If you stand in the estates of Copper Canyon, in the estates, if you look to where the sun is setting, that's the west side. This is common sense. Now, this is a little deviation from my deal, but look, I've been in contracts and negotiations in my managerial capacity. I've negotiated agreements in a dozen different countries, 4 different contexts. And we get into just these types of controversies. Bottom line is, the state's transition has been going on for decades. It's about time we resolve it. And in my opinion, it needs to be resolved before this particular request is taken under consideration and either approved or disapproved. Because what's going to happen as soon as we start developing further east or further west or further north, this same question is going to come up again. It's time we put on our big boy pants and we fix it. And you people are empowered to do.
Could you be specific there on that? Because you're talking about other development where?
Going north?
North, that's already zoned something different. So what else? You're talking about?
Are you talking about the 10 acres on the northern portion?
It's, we've already discussed the property that borders directly to the west. Okay?
To the west.
That's the 1/2 acre that's proposed here, but let's just talk about the real estate, forget about any other things. The real issue, people, is let's fix the problem.
Can I say something?
Sure.
The challenge here is that this was zoned back in 2004 and 5. It was zoned 1/3 and 1/4 acre lots, no north and south. That's the zoning. That's our Bible. It's not our option to change or rezone to 3/4 acres. We could have talked about anything from 2004 and 2005 till now, and it wouldn't mean anything other than a pretty picture because the zoning is what it is.
So there are 2 separate zones there, correct? There's R2.
Sorry, hold on a second.
people talk from the audience, we put this out on YouTube, and it doesn't pick up, they need, if someone's gonna speak, they need to come up to the podium.
Okay, so, Ted, you want to give a little time to Robin or?
Robin,
Because we've got other people ahead of Robin, Robin's already had her 3 minutes, so.
Robin, do you want to finish your point?
I yield my time now. So
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead and Lisa Humphrey, I yield my time.
Okay. There, my only point is that this particular matter is going on long enough. Let's fix it. I don't know what the solution is.
I've said the solution several times. You can buy Ms. Williams' properties, or you can petition the council. We can't help you here tonight. This is not in
I'm
our
not
power.
expecting a solution tonight.
It's not in our power. We can't do it. So,
There is, you've got the proper HOA representatives there. There should be some type of an impetus from this particular body to say, hey, we've received enough controversy on this. We've received enough crazy inputs and enough good inputs. Let's fix it. So, enough said on that for whatever it's worth. What I want to do is, and I've got a copy of what I want to say, and I won't say it all because it's more detailed than we really got time to assess. But I looked at this particular ordinance, and I found, when I look at a document, it's either compliance and or content. You're trying to comply with something, and you've got content to back it up. Neither one of those is satisfied in this document. They're marginally referred to, jumbled together. You're trying to, for one motion, approve revisions, rezoning, zoning, correcting errors. And then you have a document that says property description. You refer to it in here mistakenly as a development agreement. If you read this document, for what it says in here, there are error after error, misstatement after misstatement. You can't approve something with these kind of errors. They need to be fixed. You and I had a discussion on,
I will refrain from responding. I've written more ordinances than you've ever read.
and I have no qualm with it.
So, hold on, Bob. First, I'd ask if you could submit your list of errors to our council so that he can see what it is you're looking at. It's kind of hard to respond to, you're wrong, and no, I'm not.
Well,
that's
you can't pass an ordinance tonight.
right. That's the point.
point.
That's right. So that's what I'm saying is if you can give your written comments to him
Yeah,
before
just
this
pass it
goes to council, if it goes to council, then they can be correct so that it's accurate from your perspective.
The other issues are in the submittal in this particular document. There's a lot of omissions and things that I think need to be added. Number one, if there's no reference in here that this is an HOA, we can talk about it, but it's not there. The rezoning, you're combining a master plan change that has a public hearing, a required written document explaining what happened in those public meetings. It comes to a board, the board reads it, and then has a meeting after. You're familiar with that process. It's not in you. Needs to be in there.
You know what's in chapter, you know what chapter 213 says? Of the local government code? I said, do you know what chapter 213 of Texas local government code requires?
No.
Well, can you tell us what it requires?
It says may have meeting. May have public hearing. And it's been advertised as a public hearing. And you're having it tonight.
And it's a combination meeting that you had
That is permitted under the state.
pre-programmed the answer. If you have a public meeting, you have a public meeting. You don't say I have a public meeting and therefore now let's go and get it approved. In the same words, and that's what's happening here.
Draft ordinance.
I was told, Mr. Stransky, no, I was asked to have a proposed ordinance. You have it in your hand.
But you have it ready to
Proposed. It's proposed.
That's not the proper procedure, again, in my opinion.
All right, so Jed, I know you can entertain us for a long time, because I know there's much you have to say. But I think you've done your 3 minutes, and next on our list. So we do have your comments, thank you. And
I don't want to seem unnecessary, but I do want to be in a position.
you notice that kind of good chuckle.
I can be, by the way.
Yes, yeah, we've noticed.
But the real issues are, I do due diligence. Not enough due diligence is done by all the parties in this room today. And it needs to be, and we need to come to a resolution, and not just another delay.
Robin, you were next. You yielded your time to Robin. So this is Robin Davis again. She's going to give her address again.
581 Journey, you know where I live. I just wanted, so if we're talking about the zoning change proposal, we're talking about the northern 10 acres on the top part of that upside down L.
That's
correct? And currently, legally, it is zone R2.
That's correct.
And what you're proposing is changing that to the PDTC1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I think you'll find that most of the people here, including myself, don't want to change it from the R2. I agree that the estates transition is a separate issue. I wish we could fix that. I don't know how to do it. I don't know you for that stuff. But I think that if the question tonight is the zoning change request is for the top portion of L from R2 to the PDTC1. My recommendation in that of those that you recommend to the council is don't approve it.
I would just ask if it were you on Williams Ranch and you had thought all of this time since 2004 and 2005, that it had been was zoned the 1/3 acre, would you want it to be treated that way? That's all I would ask.
You know what? I don't think the estate transition people that thought that they had been protected really want to be treated that way either.
If they don't own the land, she does.
They do on their land.
That's not the land we're discussing.
It's not the land.
And again, this.
And I don't want to hurt Ms. Williams. I respect her. I recognize her right to sell her property for what she wants to sell it for. But you have to look at what the zoning is, what the law is. We were bound by that on the master plan. And
You're bound by it unless the landowner asks. I mean, that was, yes, any landowner that wants to have a change can come in and ask.
right, and I agree with that. The master plan committee was bound by the previous zoning.
Well, of course.
Yeah, because
And the previous zoning was R2.
That's fine. Okay, Martha Gedder.
This is Martha Gabriel at 2 Blackjack Lane. Thank you, commissioners, for all the time and work that you've put in. And I can see that you have done this over many, many years, longer than I have lived here. I've only been in Copper Canyon 1 year. We came here obviously for probably the same reason most of everybody came here. Large lot sizes, a little old town feel. And I just ask that you try to work with all the people who want to keep it that way, in whatever way that can be done. I don't know all the legal issues of it. Just listen to the people, listen to their hearts, and do what's right. Thanks.
Thank you. Todd Middlemas.
So, hi, Todd Middlemas. I live on 4557 Mahogany Lane, so the house on the bottom left, southeast corner, the southwest corner of this thing. So, I guess, it's not an easy task, but I think if I understand on this L shape, top part of the L shape, what I read is it was a mistake for them, for it not to be included in the town center. And we're looking at the intent rather than what was written down and saying, okay, we want to fix that mistake, because the intent was for it to go into the town center. And I think what I've heard, and I've only been here 3 years.
Sorry, let me correct that just a little bit. We had a request from the homeowner, from landowner, to change that description. It isn't just like, oh, we want to go back and
Oh,
fix
sorry,
it.
yeah.
But we have a request from the landowner to move it into the town center.
Yeah,
So that's
and
a little different than we just decided we wanted to fix it.
sorry, no, you're right. You're right, sorry. So as the zoning, we're looking at that, there's a request to change the zoning. And under what I heard was described was, okay, so part of that request to change the zoning was an acknowledgement that was a mistake, that the intention was for it to be included, you're taking under that under advisement. And what I would say, listening to the way what was written about the estate's transition, it sounds like there was also a mistake, that it wasn't, when it was written, there was no means and bounds, there was no map change, and so there was a mistake at the same time as well. And it seems quite arbitrary that we fix one mistake, but not the other mistake. The intention seems clear on both, right? That the intention was to increase the value of the L-shaped property by allowing it to be part of the town centre, which allows it to be subdivided more and increase the value of the property. And all I would say is it doesn't seem very fair that we're picking which mistake and intention to correct.
Just one thing, if I may.
Without addressing both. And if I, sorry, just before, I know the whole idea is we're representing all the property owners, Mrs. Williams as well as us. You know, it seems like if you have to, the zoning is meant to represent what was agreed, if there's mistakes in the zoning, and how we're trying to address it.
The challenge is that when the estate transition lots were proposed, when this pretty picture was drawn, that was long after the zoning.
Not even that pretty picture, because I remember going through the rigmarole last year about the picture itself, but if I look at the words that were written, and if I had to, again, we're interpreting intent now, because there wasn't the correct documents crafted when it was written, but somebody wrote the estate's transition, there's one estate in this whole map, which is the estates of Copper Canyon. So I'm just saying that there's clearly an intent, but it wasn't followed up with the right documents at the time. There was an intent for the top part, but it wasn't followed up with the right documents.
Thank you. So again, let me just kind of make a comment on that. I think it's inaccurate to compare fixing two mistakes, because there is a very significant difference between the two. The estate's transition issue that didn't ever get into the ordinance, someone had to, when you say it was their intent, it seems to me if they had an intent, they would have done something. The fact that it was discussed and considered and people thought about it and said, yes, it's hard for me to say that that was the intent of the authorities, but maybe it was. I'm not going to argue that. But in this case, this isn't just fixing an error because some surveyor did a bad job. We have an actual homeowner, property owner, who has come in with a specific request. And we, as a planning and zoning commission, are required to address the specific requests of property owners. That doesn't mean we agree with them, but we've got to address that. So that's a little different than the state's transition, which really doesn't fall under us at this point. It's nothing we can do anything about.
But you're being asked to approve a change.
But it's a request from a homeowner. Whether we approve it or not, it's a different question, but it's something we must consider. The estate's transition, again, I'm sorry, it's confusing. I'm sorry people didn't do what they thought other people thought they were going to do, but that's not an issue on the table for us to deal with because we cannot. The council can, but we cannot.
Here's the problem. Miss Williams owns all of it. We all agree on that. She could come in here and ask for multifamily if she wanted. And she has that right, because she's the property owner. But the ordinance specifically says that any use within the town center district can be used for commercial, retail, civic, medium density single family, and estate transition. And it doesn't say where it has to go, but it does say say is that someone has to bring in a plan, detailed site plan, concept plan development. So what is consistent is the property owner has now said on the southern portion, here's my detailed concept for a use that's permitted in town center. And on the northern part that's R2, I want to change the zoning for it, so it then connects together, so I have a unified development. That's the property. Not me, not Mr. Pate, not staff. So the problem that's created, well, it has two components. One, property was left out. Two, no zoning was actually put on a specific tract of land. One may argue that that was a mistake or not. But it doesn't change what we got tonight.
Well, and to elaborate on that, Ms. Williams could come in here and ask to put in multifamily apartment projects on there. She's not asking that. She could. We turn it down because it's not in the zone. It is not permitted in that area. So there are some things, and if she came in here and said, look, I want to build an auto body shop and a car repair lot on here, we would say, no, that's not permitted in the ordinance. What she has asked for is permitted in the zone. Just to be clear. So when he said apartments,
If you turn,
We'll talk about this anyway, I think.
but here's the problem, on the bottom part, what right do you have to deny? None. On the top part, you have discretion. And on the bottom part, you have no.
again, this was my earlier question is what ability do we have to say that, no, our lawyer's wrong, we're going to go the other way? We represent the town. We all pay our taxes in this town. And I know we had someone here who said they love paying legal fees. When it goes down, I hate legal fees. I really, really hate legal fees. And
I'm kind of hating a lot tonight.
yeah. But the one thing that we really, really don't want this town to do is get sued and lose. It's one thing to get sued. Anybody can sue anybody or anything. That's your right as an American. But the point is, you need to have the facts aligned so that you have a defensible case to win. And if we do things that are clearly against our legal advice, we risk the town's money, your taxes, in losing a lawsuit. That's the risk that we face. Not us personally, but we're fiduciaries for the town. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through this. We are trying to protect the town as part of our job. All right, next. Carolyn, I'm sorry, you can say your last name? Stefanowski? Stefanski.
I figured you were just holding on to it.
I was gonna put it last, so maybe we can all run out of steam before the.
I was right after Ted. I don't know how I got it from this file. First of all, I truly appreciate the passion of everybody in this room. I've lived here almost a whole lot of 5 months. So we're new here. My husband and I built our dream home in Copper Canyon because of the vast, open, rural feeling and the wonderful people we met even just building it. I mean, just tremendous people. But allowing a builder to come in and build 3 houses per acre greatly diminishes this wonderful town atmosphere. And my concern is, what happens when the next guy, he wants to sell you 80 acres? Are we gonna build 240 houses on those based upon this criteria? I think it's a very slippery slope that we're going down here. Where does it stop? And please project the proposal. Thank you.
Did she ever address 320 Mobile Drive?
Oh, sorry, 320 Mobile Drive.
Right. Which, not to be argumentative, but is in the far northwest corner. Right?
It was a little pretty mossy green color on this. It's pretty nice.
Yes, right. It's zone what now? 2 acres?
One.
Okay, next, Jeannie Courtright. Wasn't bad. Oh, good. We move on. No, we'll skip her for a moment and go to Nancy Henry. You missed your turn. You missed the bathroom.
You're right after me, Jean. I'm Nancy Henry. I live at 761 Lonesome Dove Lane. And I guess what I don't understand is May the 11th, 2015, they had the joint meeting of the P&Z and council who passed the 3/4 acre transition and extended it all the way up to the Shackelford property. And there's an ordinance 15-008 with a map showing it.
I'm happy to see it.
Okay, I don't have the ordinance with me. I can email it to you.
I have it.
You have it. And they also have the map attached to it showing the transition up by the Shackelford property and the estates at Copper Canyon. And both P&Z and.
Which map is that, Mr. Plain?
This is the one with the ordinance 15-008.
That's a master plan, not a zoning map.
So, but they passed all of that back, the P&Z and the council, May the 11th, 2015.
I will quote to you from those minutes. Attorney Welch stated that on the north side it is zoned 3 units per acre, and on the south side it is zoned 4 units per acre.
I know what it says.
Right, so I'm sorry, I'm missing your point.
So I think that the intent was there. I'd like to also know, some of the other are y'all voting on this tonight, or is this just our public hearing?
It's a public hearing, and we can vote on it to recommend it to council or reject it.
Because I think y'all have maybe another public hearing or something, so.
Maybe we get a different group of people.
Get more people in. We got a
Yeah.
lot of people here that are right here.
And by the way, I might point out that Nancy lives on Lonesome Dove Lane. You did
I
that
didn't say
761.
that, didn't I?
Sort of carnival. Okay, so
Here I go.
I'll change it a later room, won't it?
Sorry, my mom used to smoke a cigarette, so then it would count.
Address.
Oh, I'm Jean Courtright. My family, my mother, we've owned our land for over 16 years now. So we've been here a long time. That road that we keep talking about is our private drive. It is not an easement. It is a private drive. It's the only way in and out of our property. We're landlocked. Unfortunately, we used to own Williams' property a million years ago. And we had to sell it because of the drought, because we ran cattle, and if we still had it, we wouldn't be here today. But anyway, I just need to clear up some things. I do believe in Dave. I think he's really tried to work, with us. Yes, I'd like it to be 3/4 acre, but I feel like that was just fluff kind of blown up us by Sue, and so I'm not gonna go into all that. However, I've gotten a trillion emails and texts and phone calls about the emergency exit out onto our private road, and I would ask that Dave take that off because that has not been approved by any of us. And you cannot use a private road for an emergency exit, and I would ask that he maybe work with the Vickeries, since he was able to, agree on an entrance together, maybe they can agree on a fire exit together, because we've got the retention ponds on the south side with Toll Brothers. Now we're getting the sprinkler systems inside the houses. However, we're going to have 35 houses that are all gonna have barbecue pits. They're all gonna have outdoor kitchens if they're the kind of homes that are going to be built. And a sprinkler system inside a house is not gonna help with any kind of fire protection. So I really think the city needs to think about that. And so I would ask for you to think about that too. And also the buffer might
60-foot road that goes in and out, and it should not be considered a buffer for Copper, the state of Copper Canyon. They should have their own buffer within my road, and then we should have a buffer against that west side of our road. This really directly affects my family completely. And I come up here a million times to ask that it be done considerably, thoughtfully, and with a lot of integrity for the town to do it right, because across the street on 407, it was not done right. Trees were raised, no trees were preserved. I sat up here and asked Toll Brothers, oh yeah, we'll do all that. I understand that it's hard to develop property when there's trees already there and they have to replant. I appreciate him saying he'll replant trees. I do ask that all the natural buffer on our side and on the north side be preserved, because those little trees they're gonna plant are not gonna be any kind of buffer for me and my family. My mother still lives there. She's just turned 84. My sisters and I own the other 50 so acres. And I do think that this is the lesser of a lot of evils that could go on this property. And I've known Luann, and I know she's tired. We're all tired. And we gotta make something work. But we gotta make it work right. And I am very scared about fire, so that needs to be addressed. And the noise of the pump station, I don't know how loud that's gonna be either down on that west side.
Sorry to interrupt you. Did we agree on it? I think we did.
Yes, well, but I mean, I've got 2 sisters and a mother, so I really have 12 minutes, but I would just like Dave to consider, first of all, the emergency exit needs to be taken off because we've not approved that. No one in my family has approved that. And also, I think we need to really talk about fire hazards, all that stuff. Thank you.
Great, thank you. By the way, for those of you who didn't catch that, Shackleford, when we say Shackleford, that's the property. And that's our code name for that drive, the Shackleford. And I think as you heard me ask Dave earlier, that he does not have the right to make changes to her land. He's been talking about grading and trees on his land right there along the property line. If he wants to go across that property line, he needs to have her permission. Just to be clear. So that, I think that, oh, next, where's that? Michael Duroy. Did I get that in with close?
Yeah, you got to do it for us, actually. Hi, I'm Mike Roy. We're actually building right now on 31 Bradford Lane, Foods Ranch. We actually both live in California. We're moving out here just to get away from exactly what we're trying to do. And I just encourage you to keep in mind that this actually is zoned. The area you're talking about is zoned as 2 acre lots, so there's absolutely no obligation to change the zoning on that section line. But you're entering a very slippery slope if you start entertaining a lot of zoning kind changes just because the homeowner wants to change it. I don't know law in Texas. Obviously, I've lived 51 years in California. I'm getting away from California because I can't stand California and this kind of behavior. But the kind of actions going on in my state are coming this way. And it's very, very dangerous because now they're putting high density housing in places that you would never want high density housing to go into. And you guys all live here. You live here because it's rural. We're buying here because it's rural, but still close to a town. I'm not going to get into too much meat and potatoes because I don't have a lot of history here, obviously. But we are investing. We have a 3.6 acre lot here, so we're investing a lot to be here. I just hate to regret moving into this area before we even finish building.
Thank you. And welcome. All Californians are welcome here.
Well, it depends on how they vote.
As long as they bring their tax dollars. Very good. Very good. Paul Bosco. Paul, there he is, I was hiding in the back row. Just so you know, he used to sit up. He's a refugee from this council.
Nice. Paul Bosco, 4509 Mahogany Lane. I've been involved in all of this more than I probably care to be at this point standing up here, along with a couple of ladies there, some of these people here. You know, my mind is spinning with all of the stuff that's been thrown out here. From the tax base, money we need in order to sustain our roads and so on and so forth. The need a traffic light along 407, we've talked about that for 20 years. Do I think that 10 or 12 houses or 15 houses on the north side here is going to make a difference whether we get a traffic light? I don't think so.
35.
Well, that's assuming that they don't.
Assuming they get this.
Yes, under this plan, then they don't develop the
Western.
East or west, the eastern portion.
Yeah, the eastern portion of the western portion. Yeah.
Along the west line of the states of Copper Canyon. So skipping through all of these, why we need it and why we don't and what's wrong with it, it comes down to, I keep hearing the word intent. What was the intent? It was intended to include that. Somebody missed it. There was a mistake that was intended to be put in there originally. Part of the intent, when I was on the board, part of the commissions and part of the planning and everything, was to have 3/4 acre lots along the western boundary of the states of Copper Canyon. There is no mistake in my mind. There is no definition that's any different than that, that's where 3/4 acre lots were intended to be. And I think, I don't know, I think he's done a pretty good job of trying to get as many lots and not be as aggressive as it could be. But if we're looking to do two things here, make a recommendation on changing the zoning on the north property. And for lack of better words, trying to define or clean up the transition area because of intent. Because you have to hang your hat on something when you make this decision to rezone or not approve this plan. You have to hang your hat on something. But if you're going to hang your hat on intent, then hang it all the way along all of the various items that are open. You have to hang it on intent. The intent was 3/4 acres. And then the inclusion up north.
Thank you, Paul. Next is Greg Porter.
Oh, there's a lot. Greg Porter, 150 Quiet Hill. I had a question. We talked about the sewer. What's the GPMs? What's our flow that Fire Mountain? So we have a clue of a ballpark.
So we've got a total of 400,000 that was allocated with the Flower Mound agreement. Victory's using a little bit less than half of that. They're at like 195. And then the remainder is all to be used on the north side.
Right, so if that sewer, and this is a concern, I'm not like trying to do hearsay, it's a concern. I build for developers. So I get the development to the end user. In situations like this, if that sewer crosses 407 in 5 years, we're gonna be here arguing about apartments. It's gonna happen because of our household median income is gonna surpass, or we've been avoiding it recently due to our septic community, which like double. And we're only about 40 to 50% developed. I don't know all the math, but I can tell you that's not tax dollars. And that's high density, and then that's in the future schools, and it's gonna fall on the burden of us. So I just want to, I don't know, but I do know with an extra 200,000 gallons, that will fill Copper Canyon twice over. They could run it all the way to north to supply all of Copper Canyon sewer. I don't know if that was the intent when it was set, but it sure looks like somebody had future plans to the north, and I believe that would be lost numbers to the north. I don't know, but it seems suspicious to me. That's my concern.
In the ordinance, it's only allowed to stay in that portion of town center.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
oh, well, I hear you, Don, but let me ask you a question. We're asking to rezone the north. Can the landowners request to rezone the rest of town, the rest of that portion to something different?
They can request.
Right.
So that would be other different plans.
No, right, I understand. I mean,
For
so,
example.
well, I can say this got a lot of money, go to half acre, you can do septic right there. And you don't have to do sewer. I don't know, maybe find somewhere in the middle, meet both in the intent. But again, I don't want to get into anymore. I just want to voice my concern with sewer, and it crosses 407. That ordinance can be changed just as easy as zoning can.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Since you know.
No, I wouldn't say that much.
Yeah.
Just listen.
I was gonna make a bet with this group that within the next, call it 10 years, maybe 5, we're gonna end up with no such thing as septic tanks. It's gonna be mandated by law, we must have sewers. That was gonna be my bet. Do you think I'm making a bad bet? By state law.
In how long?
By Denton County or?
I say 10, you're a little early, but I would say with the advancements in septic systems and the amount of power that we've given to our government with the EPA and TECQ, they've created these aerobic systems now that actually you don't have to sprinkle your lawn because they do it for you. And it creates more nitrogen, which actually increases your water content.
Well, I'm hopeful you're right, because I'm on.
I hope so, but the problem is when you get high density, septic goes away, sewer comes in, now you have these pump stations, lift stations, and you know.
Well, as you maybe heard earlier, that's why we have resisted the certificate from Cross Timbers to provide sewage to the entire town.
I support Ms. Williams' right to sell Echelons. I'll tell you, it's lose-lose. And I'll tell you, we all had a chance to talk to candidates last year and vote, so you know how they're gonna vote. So it's, shouldn't be a shock whenever it turns out the way it does. Anyways, just want to voice of concern. I hope everybody understands what's coming down the road if you bring sewer across the board. Again, I'm not telling the future, just a concern.
Well, I think there still is a hope that we will end up with some commercial. I think there's still.
I like Waterburger, and that's only like 12 cars.
That's only a conditional use permit, so you gotta get, I mean, it's not just lined up. Although I love Whataburger, it can be really close. There's one way to go with that one.
It's not in and out, please. Not really.
No, and those Californians can keep their in and out. Yeah, in and out, yeah, whatever. Okay. I cannot believe that we are out. There must be somebody else that wants to make another comment. That's on my list. You had your 3 minutes. You just, hey, why don't you use your wife's name and come up here? Don't do it by it. Okay, anyone else? All right, next on the agenda. I will close public input.
Are you sure you want to?
I don't know, I just enjoy responding to everybody's comments so much. So, next. So now we are to the phase of item 5 on the agenda, which is action and discussion items. That's for this commission to discuss, consider, and act upon a recommendation of town council recording a request to amend the master plan ordinance, comprehensive zoning ordinance, and zoning map of the town of Copper Canyon, Texas, by amending the master plan, the map thereof, and amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance and the zoning map to grant a change in zoning from residential to R2, the planned development of Town Center 1, PDTC 1, for approximately 10 acres, and by granting a change in zoning from Town Center, planned development of Town Center 1, PDTC 1, on approximately 10 acres of real property to allow the development of approximately 35 35, single-family lots located north of FM 407 between Jernigan Road and Copper Canyon Road, Denton Central Appraisal District properties 17043, 17044, 17045, and 17047. Copper Canyon, Denton County, Texas, providing concept plans, development standards, regulations, street details, entrance detail, preliminary sewer plan, preliminary water plan, preliminary sewer plan, fence detail, street lighting, and I think, plan development, agreement, right?
Yes.
Added to the text here. So that's where we are. We're now at the discussion phase here, council, commission. So I would open it to discussion, and maybe we'll kind of start at the end there and kind of any comments.
My understanding, the only thing on the table today, tonight, is that one piece being put in
Well, and then recommending the package.
the package. We're not talking all the talk about transitional three-quarter, that's nothing to do with it.
So we cannot deal anything with transition, that's not our purview.
So it's only that one.
It's an Amber Alert.
At least it's not a tornado. I was hoping for a tornado.
So am I out of order if I wanted, as you did earlier, ask a question of, okay, so here's, so I want to hypothetical, right? We talked about intents. If, and we talked about the fact that there are really only, I think, three ways, Marcus said two, three ways to change the intent of the three-quarter transition. One is, Ms. Williams makes a change, works to change that herself because she owns the land. Two is, somebody buys the land and they can do whatever they want with it. Or three is, you have to petition city council in order to make this change. Everybody agree that those are the three options? Because I'm trying to get to this, how do we put this behind? Those are the three options. The last option is the community petitions the city council, make the change. And as I understand it, based on my time on the pre-map plan, if you do that and the city decides to make that change, then Ms. Williams has the option to sue the city, right, for loss of value. Is that's not accurate? I'm trying to get past the opinion to get the facts on the table.
She has the right to oppose the zoning, which would require a supermajority of the council to approve.
Right. And if they did it, then she would have the right to sue. That's where the lawsuit is.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. So those are the three options to solve the three-quarters problem.
Space transition issue. Which again, those are not on our table.
Right, I understand. I'm trying to baseline this, right? Because I have a hypothetical. So now take those three. Right? The first two are probably not likely to happen. The third is the option, right? If the community petitions the council and the council takes it up. If that doesn't happen, right? If the three-quarter acres is as it is now, as one of the permitted uses and nothing changes, and the best you can get is the half-acre transition that the developer is proposing. Would you then want to go ahead as a community and agree to take this 10 acres and zone it into the master plan so that you could get a residential development on that side versus take the gamble of a possible lawsuit, take the gamble of the developer pulls out and you get commercial development on that side? Because that's what I think this comes down to, right? And so for the commission, we can't do anything about the three-quarters. Part of what we're responsible for, though, is to look at that zoning request for the 2 acres. And how does that work relative to the town? Okay, so I'm trying to understand where you guys are relative to that option.
One of our council members is out of the room. Could you give your three options again so that Larry can hear?
Sure. Yeah, Larry.
Use your microphone.
Okay, so Larry, I think there are three options on addressing this three-quarter transition question. Right? It's not something we're solving tonight, but I have a hypothetical that I'm asking the community. And so I wanted to baseline this. So option one is that Ms. Williams decides that she's going to go with three-quarters. That she doesn't seem to want to do that. She wants to develop this. And right now that's a half acre based on work with the developer. The second option would be somebody buys her property and they can do whatever they want with it. The third option is that the community can petition the council to basically make a unilateral decision to rezone it. In which case you run the risk of.
The fourth option is citywide.
Fourth option, citywide, which actually we talked about, Robin, when we were trying to figure out how to solve this with Metro.
The town could petition to rezone from already person.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I can't hear you, sorry.
No, I thought that what they said was that the person that owned the land, like the swing, would have to petition the land to be rezoned.
That's the first option.
That's one that.
That's the
community
third
can
option.
Petition the town council to choose, so, because the town council has the right to change the timing.
So what I'm trying to get to is, if it is a low probability that this is going to get rezoned to 3/4 acres, then you're left with, is this development deal worth doing? Is it worth taking a half-acre transition and knowing you have a residential buffer on that side? Or the alternative is not, and you end up with, you potentially end up with commercial.
Or third acre.
Or 30, right? So this is a question about, I'm asking what I like specifically is the residents in the estates, because you're the ones who are affected, right?
Well,
I'm sorry, but I mean, I don't want somebody who's on the, the northwest corner, no offense, weighing in on this, because they're not directly affected by this issue, right? I'm trying to understand for the folks who are affected with this transition area, if you can't get to 3/4, because personally, I think it's very low likelihood, given those options, are you willing to take a bird in the hand? Because the reason I'm asking that is because for me personally, it weighs into how I feel about this rezoning of the 2 acre of the R2. Right? Because rezoning R2 doesn't make it a done deal, but it sets in motion getting this development done. And if you don't do it, I personally think that the deal probably falls apart.
If we
and you'll back out with whatever ends up happening from some other developer. And that's why I'm trying to understand how the estate's residents would feel about that.
These two things are linked together, we kind of position them separate, but what if we said, no, you're not gonna rezone that R2, but the other thing, well, we can send that one to the council, it's only half a lot, it's not gonna work. So the rezoning is essential to the completion of the entire PD1, which is half acres on the east side, 1/3, it's what you've seen up here on the screen, and this is a fair question. You don't like that, you aren't gonna get 1/3 acre, you just wanna say the heck with it, let Ms. Williams sue the city for diminishment of the value of her property, because we've now refused her. She's got a buyer, and we're saying, no, you can't do that, so she will sue the city. And so Robin, you're waving your hands.
Yeah, just consider that we could win.
So understood. So does my hypothetical make sense? Because I still would like a show of hands. Does my hypothetical make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, we ask the question. Is there anybody who it doesn't make sense to? I asked the question wrong way.
Well, because if you voted through and then he pulls out.
It's always a risk.
Which is how we got this to begin
I
with.
understand, it's always a risk. Life is about making educated probability guesses as to what you want to do, right? That's all I'm asking for you. So for the residents that live in the estates, show of hands, if you didn't think you could get the 3/4 of an acre zoned in, would you want to take this at half of an acre as a transition, or would you rather run the gamble for commercial?
Can I ask a question before we answer this? Like, how does this plan change? You change the zoning to the top, it's now part of town center. What's to stop the decision to say, actually, we're gonna make it a third and a half?
No, it would look just like this. If we
It would
rezone the 2 acres,
only look like this.
to make this plan happen, we need to rezone that 2 acres into town center.
I think he's asking a different question,
Okay.
which is say you rezone R2, and then there's a request to change the map itself.
Yeah, because I heard it's not a zoning, this is not like the.
Yeah, how do you obligate the developer if you make your R2 change?
Well, we've got council members, a commission member that's asked.
So really, the city's protecting themselves because it's R2. She's asked for 1/3. Dave said he can make this work. It's not like you're gonna go back and go, I want all 1/3.
No.
Yes, we do know.
That's the part of the developer, that's the developer agreement, so we didn't ask the question, the developer agreement can't be enacted right now, because that plan doesn't work.
Does the development agreement the same as the zoning?
No, but let's step through it, so if we make the decision tonight to rezone R2 into the master plan, right? Nothing is a done deal, the development isn't a done deal, and all we're gonna do is make a recommendation, city council will still vote on that. Included in that is the developer proposal, which would also go with that.
And the development agreement.
And also agreement.
This plan.
And so nothing gets finalized, even the recommendation, if we make that recommendation to change the zoning, until city council gets it. Right? So you could ask that there be made, that it be done in a way, I assume it could be done legally, that there's a way to bind those two things together.
Yeah.
If we can bond them, if we could bond them, I think it would.
Yeah.
They can't be bonded, then
Yeah.
you can imagine that.
The ordinance that would get passed, the commission, that Mitch is asking you about, is it would have all the development regulations, would have the entry feature, would have all of the development regulations that go along with it, so that he would build exactly what you see up there. That's what.
Including the changes in draft.
But you guys are, the way you're all talking, you're the upper quarter, the horizontal leg right now is under responsibility of the village under 2 acres. And the landowner has the right to petition the city to ask for a variance. It's still the city's responsibility, regardless of what the landowner wants, to hear the people. And that's what I hear. You guys aren't listening to us. You're wanting to provide what the person wants, you're afraid of a lawsuit.
There's two different things.
You can't get a variance for use. So
Yeah, he just used the wrong term, I think. What he meant is a change, not a variance.
Again, his intent is to say change the zone. Yeah, it wasn't, even though he said that.
But
Yeah,
intent
so
only,
again, we're on
intent only comes into play in interpreting an ordinance or a law if there's a ambiguity. There is no ambiguity in what's written in the ordinance. There's no map.
The bottom line here is they have a choice to make, rezone that or not rezone that.
On the R2.
That's it. And that's really it. And you either
Well-
choose yes or no. My suggestion on the fifth, you laid out 4 scenarios. The fifth one would be no zone it. Let us have a chance as the estates of Copper Canyon people, since you all our thoughts on that. We could actually sit with them. Maybe they give us some lot sizes, maybe we get some more screening along there for the homeowners and talk about that. But today, I don't know if we're meeting what's going on there, if that's happening or not. And the only way that probably happens is when you don't zone, when you don't recommend zoning that acreage to the north. And at that point, maybe at that point, the state of Copper Canyon is on board with supporting it because we've come to a bird in the hand, as you put it, that we can live with.
Let me make it real simple. If this is not approved tonight, we will drop it.
Very good.
I'll make it real simple. We spent almost a year on this, and I spent 2 years on it before that. But this is kind of it for us.
You haven't met.
We've had a lot of changes too. We were told some things that haven't worked out. I've got $150,000 in this now.
And you did meet with the estate people.
And I did meet with.
Well, that doesn't mean you did anything with it.
I tried to have an open door, and what I'm saying is, the choice is, we do this or we don't.
So I still think we didn't answer that.
Well, I apologize, I wasn't obviously aware of that, but at that point, you didn't have the support of the, even though you came to an agreement with, or you met with them, you still didn't need any of their support. And I'm trying to get you that support. What can we do to get you the state of Copper Canyon support to allow you to do something on that property and build something on that property?
The difference.
Can I get back to my question, please? Can I get, hold on a second, I'm trying to regain control here, right? And I just done that.
Don't make any.
Hang on. So can we, again, so the commission needs to discuss how it feels about this based on all the feedback we've got from everybody. I asked for one additional piece of information. I don't want to open everything back up from scratch, right? So can I simply, based on the options as I understand them, get feedback from the residents of the estates, how you would feel about this? Right? If you can't, if there's no way to get the 3/4 zone, and the best you can get, bird in the hand, is the half acre that you have here.
This
So don't take it or not. So show, I don't know how many people in the room from the state.
And we're gonna take your names.
Show of hands, how many would take it?
Sorry,
I need,
Just a question about it.
I'll ask a question.
I need,
Okay.
because I cannot give you my opinion. The only way that I would be able to give an opinion, and I'm gonna say this as kindly as I can, or ask this question. I would have to know that I have some kind of document that I can read and see from Mr. Bob Hager that is legal documentation that shows me that should those be tied together, it's legally binding.
Okay, so
Because
soon,
I'm not going to play this game again.
understood.
Yeah,
So
it's
soon you will, right? That was the binding question.
And that is happy with this arrangement, whatever this is.
Would you accept the legal letter from Ted? He said they were bound.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the binding question earlier. So soon that it will be done, soon that will be done in a way that's binding, right? Show of hands, how many of the residents would take it with the half of an acre?
As it
Okay, I see two that would, how many?
I'm halfway there.
So I have the 2.5, so how many, I'm not trying to sell, I'm trying to understand
But
who they
I
all
want
are.
my neighbors. I have to go.
How many would not take it? Show of hands.
Wait, back up. How many people here live in the estate? Can you raise your hands? Let's just see, how many people here live in estates? Boys of God. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but of course.
How many are not here?
Pretty good.
Five were here,
Okay, but
in addition to you. Okay, so you got their votes, all right? Okay, so that's, I'd say it's 10 votes potential. Okay, so. Now,
So I saw 2.5 said yes. So does that mean that there's 7.5 that would say no?
Yes, that answer to that.
So the answer is you would prefer this be turned down tonight, him to walk away, Ms. Williams to lose her sale, and I think I think she should be taking your names down as people who diminish the value of her property, because.
Well, we have not diminished the value.
Yes, you have.
No, we have not. The only thing we've said is we are against zoning, rezoning that acreage up there on the north side. That's a legal stand.
Sorry, well, if we don't, again, to be clear, if we don't rezone the acreage to the north, the south is irrelevant. It's all one development.
That doesn't, we're not responsible to make our property worth as much as possible by rezoning everything as we go along.
Well, are you sure that?
Yeah, I am positive of that.
You're sure we're not responsible to help the homeowner?
We are certainly.
You think that we're responsible to everyone else in town, but not the landowner? They don't think there's a balance?
That's a different question. You're asking me if we're responsible to make the landowner's property as valuable as
Not you.
possible by rezoning the property. And no, we are not responsible today, nor are you, nor is the city council.
Well, actually, we are, but.
You are not.
I have to worry about my coverage as well, my house.
I'm sorry?
I also worry about my house. And you need to worry about my house as well.
Yes, yeah,
Okay, so since I opened this question, I'm gonna close the question.
okay.
My takeaway was 2.5 of 10 residents would be in favor of it, 7.5 wouldn't, meaning they're okay taking the risk that the developer walks away.
That's what I heard. Understand, I'm not putting judgment on it. I'm trying to clarify objectively where the residents are. Thank you.
All right, did you want to make some comments?
I don't even know what to say after all of that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
Sorry, hold on one second. There's a little unusual, I like to recognize an alternate of our committee. He's an alternate and he's been involved in this before, so I can point him out. Yeah. This is not public input, this is addition.
Jeff Dahl, 1595 Evans Lane. I am an alternate. Everybody showed up healthy, so I'm sitting back there. Included. This is all about risk mitigation. I've worked with a lot of large companies like Scott and Larry, 40 different countries. Every week it's about risk mitigation. Okay, we know for a fact that Victory is holding up for commercial. Okay, you know what that means?
Then, right? Yeah, it's not. They won't be living in this one.
Okay, so hypothetically, I mean, I think where we were trying to get to in hypotheticals was a fair question. If you take that top part off and leave 2 acres, what developer is going to want that little sliver right there for residential? Okay, so what's going to happen? She's going to partner up with Victories, and it's all going to be commercial. Thank you.
Well, again, I'm sorry, we can't keep taking, we close the public input. Unless you have a specific question, not an opinion, I'll recognize someone's question. Can you phrase it as a question? Sure. How about phrase it as a question?
Okay, my name is Scott George. I lived here for 25 years. And I have 22 acres of Chin Chapel in Germany. I've known Dave Siciliano for 30 years. He's a Vietnam veteran, special forces, fantastic guy, flies jet airplanes and helicopters. He's a remarkable man. And he's probably the most straightforward guy I know. So I have a lot of respect for him. I just have heard so much from the estates, and I don't think you're being passionate. I really don't understand your argument, why you don't want them there. After all, your area was rezoned so that you can have the homes you've got. But having said that, get to my question. I just wanted to go into this, I'm in favor of this, because the city needs the money. And it's on the 407 corridor, which is we're gonna end up with what the mess that they've got, like just believe the mess they got down on Chin Chapel Road in 407. I don't want all that stuff down here. And I think that we should go with this because that is the burden at hand. I know that Dave Siciliano will build that for the city of Canyon, and it will be a positive thing. And Ms. Williams has every right to ask this council or this committee present to the council for the zone change. She has that right. It's that simple. And I just want to say, my question is, I hope you accept my, I'm asking you to accept my response. I'm in favor of that.
Okay. See, where are we over here? Risk mitigation was well put, Joe. I think, for what it's worth, that that the best move for this commission is to recommend this to the council and then let you guys choose the council. Because the council has the right to override us, turn us down, and whatever. We are just a recommendation. We are not responsible for every aspect of the city. The council is. That's why they're elected. We're not. I think, as it was pointed out here, we cannot resolve the estate's transition.
So many of you there in the States are, I understand, are lawyers, and therefore work for free, work for yourself. Ted is a very skilled contract negotiator. So if the estate's HOA wants to engage an attorney or themselves and put a petition to the town council, I think that's what they should do. If they feel that they have a chance of success. And I don't think that's our position tonight to resolve the estate's transition question. I think, for me personally, while I would like to see that land remain undeveloped forever, I believe that we have a legal duty to follow our legal advice and avoid a clear impairment of Ms. Williams' property by turning this down. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the zoning request from Ms. Williams and that we recommend the package to the council for their consideration. And the complete package, including the development, including the street light design, including the front gate script, all of that, as proposed by the developer and as reviewed by the DRC and as reviewed by our engineer and as reviewed by our legal counsel. I think, again, as much as I would love to say, leave it longhorns forever, that's not I don't have that ability. I have to protect the town and do our legal duty, so I make that recommendation. If we have the rest of these folks, whether they will second it.
I'll second it.
So can we have a question first?
Sure.
Okay, so I know there were some concerns raised relative to the developer agreement and the, for example, the lake.
Yes.
Should we make those recommendations relative to this now, or does that get left? Because if we send it out, it goes as is.
No, it doesn't. Actually, there's,
This is a draft.
this is a draft.
Okay.
And so you typically, P&Zs don't get copies of ordinances. You get a zoning case. And zoning case would be approved or not approved, a site plan, development plan, a concept plan. And so we put this in ordinance form to tell you this.
But we're not talking about the ordinance. We're talking about the supporting materials.
And
And they're drafts. The development agreement is still a draft.
right. So these are development standards. And so we've got some things to clean up on the entry.
I just don't want that to be misleading, because that's not what approved.
That's why I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to send something up that was sending a message that we were okay with that.
No, we're not saying this is perfect, it's done. That's not what we're saying.
But if you want to include the comments about the emergency access and maybe more buffering of the trees.
Yes.
Take that to the council as well.
Yes. I will add that
It's
to my
not
motion.
uncommon for the council to have a hearing. At the hearing, things get brought up, things get tabled. They'll have another meeting to get those things resolved, and we'll do the ordinance based on instructions from council. This was only a draft, wasn't meant to get passed. It was meant to have a conversation to show what it would look like and make sure it was binding. It's just what I do.
So I would amend my motion to include the instructions to the developer to resolve the fire exit on the property that's not currently authorized, and to be more explicit on trees. If you could.
I'd like to address one or two of those. The emergency exit ingress egress points I have there do not connect to her property. Those are on my property.
Okay.
Now, those are just future points where I thought we might want that in case she needed a second point of ingress egress, which we did. But she has not given us anything. Those are not on her property. Those are completely under our control. And I think it would be an oversight to have her property landlocked and not have some provision.
I think you're fine. So long as it's not on her property, it doesn't.
Yeah.
As long as you're not accessing her
If
property.
it's a potential, what he's telling
We
me,
can-
potential stub out.
Yes, potential stuff out if she ever sells her property.
We
Okay,
said
fine.
potential, we may not, we may give those back to the homeowners after a period of time if
shed some off.
Okay, so that's not a concern.
Yeah, and the trees, we can't get a lot more specific until we actually do our engineering.
Well, we have a motion on the table, and we could have comments all night long. So we have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion?
I'm the second.
Kevin's a second. No, more discussion of the specific motion. All right, in that case, I call the question, and I'd like to hear voice votes so that everybody knows who's voting for what.
Yes.
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 Yes, okay. So we do approve the zoning change.
And you approve the recommendation.
We do approve the well, we approved, yes, it goes to the council for their final approval. Yes, we are now recommending this to the council, which is again, sorry, put the dates in your calendar.
November 22nd.
November 22nd.
Pretty sure.
Everything away from Thanksgiving. Thank you all for your input, very much appreciated. Great discussion, thank you.